Good morning, ladies and can you hear me? No? Yes? Okay. Good. We will focus on strengthening public trust, compliance, and legitimacy. As tax administrators and policymakers, I'm sure you will all agree that building public trust and legitimacy is critical to successful property taxation. Where government enjoys high levels of public trust, voluntary compliance is usually high, and this is fundamental to any tax system. However, across countries, we observe that due to a host of factors, public trust and the legitimacy of government when it comes to collecting tax is usually very low. This in turn results in low compliance rates, unequal distribution of the tax burden, and ultimately undermines the overall fairness and effectiveness of the tax systems. In recent years, we have seen that public trust seems to have been declining in line with the decline in trust in government institutions. Broadly speaking, the causes of the decline can be traced to a number of factors, including weak transparency in valuation systems, where the way properties are assessed are either inconsistent or just not transparent enough for taxpayers to understand. Taxpayers tend to have very low trust in the system. Incomplete coverage leading to unequal distribution of tax burden and taxpayers' perceptions of unfairness and inequity in the system is another cause. For example, where identification only covers some properties and the tax burden is borne by only those whose properties have been captured, this makes taxpayers tend to see the system as unequitable and unfair, leading to low trust and an unwillingness to pay the tax. Weak links between revenue and services. So property taxes, being a local tax, tend to be closely associated to the service that councils provide. However, where few services are provided and or where they're not visible, the social contract between taxpayers and government is weak, and that undermines the trust in government and its legitimacy to collect taxes. With low trust, compliance is low, revenue dwindles, and service delivery becomes almost non-existent because there's not enough revenue. And so a vicious cycle begins, leaving us with the question of how do we break this cycle? Should taxpayers comply first, or should council start to deliver service first? Then there's also the lack of credible threat of enforcement or selective enforcement. So where there's no threat of enforcement, we know compliance will be low. But even more linked to trust is where enforcement is not the same across board. So where it's selective. Where there's no real threat and the enforcement is selected, then people perceive the system as unfair, and that erodes their trust and therefore dwindles compliance even further. So this is just an overview of some of the challenges, key challenges, which of course will differ depending on your different contexts. But all these factors are important for governments and reform to pay attention to and to address in order to ensure improvements in property tax performance and successful reforms. So with that said, this session will explore these challenges and strategies for building public trust, legitimacy, and compliance. Our speakers today will share their unique experiences of these challenges and the strategies they have been using to try to address them. So please welcome with me our speakers for this morning, Dr. Colette Nyirakamana, please. Speakers, please come up. Nicolo Merieji, Nima Kamara, and Rosetta Wilson. Round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so our first speaker for today will be Colette Nyirakamana. Colette is research lead for the LoGRI program and senior research associate at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy of the University of Toronto. Prior to joining LoGRI, Colette worked as program lead for the Africa Property Tax Initiative at the International Center for Tax and Development, where she was in charge of supporting APTI-funded researchers, leading research projects, engaging with key stakeholders and advising governments in the design of property tax reform efforts. Her research focuses on local finances, with particular emphasis on the institutional and political factors that create favorable and unfavorable conditions for effective revenue mobilization. She holds a doctoral degree in comparative. I beg your pardon. She holds a doctoral degree in comparative public policy from McMaster University in Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me, Colette Nyakamana.
Bonjour à tout le monde, je veux parler en français. So for the Anglophones, you'll have to use the devices for translation. Okay, let me know if all is set. I think it should be. Pour les francophones, pardon, les anglophones. OK. Donc, en fait, est-ce qu'on peut montrer mes diapositives? Je peux commencer pendant qu'on les montre. Donc, les diapositives sont en anglais pour les anglophones également. Donc, je commencerai ici, en fait, mon sujet est sur la conformité, donc à dire que la conformité en matière d'impôt foncier est ce à quoi aspirent, bref, tous les gouvernements, mais on sait qu'elle demeure très faible, et ce qui aussi indique une faible performance de l'impôt foncier. Et donc, en moyenne, on sait que les pays mobilisent environ 30% des recettes prévues. Des fois, c'est bas, des fois, c'est plus haut. Et cette sous-performance ne s'explique pas seulement à partir des problèmes techniques, technologiques ou politiques, mais il y a également la confiance du public qui est très importante ici. Et donc, avec les tendances actuelles où l'impôt foncier devient voilà, un impôt très important pour les revenus, pour les gouvernements locaux, où on voit qu'il y a un regain des réformes. Donc, une question qui se pose est de savoir comment concevoir des réformes de manière à intégrer les préférences des contribuables, mais aussi augmenter la confiance publique. Next slide. Next slide, please. OK. Donc, la confiance publique, ici, j'aimerais voilà, donner un aperçu qu'elle repose sur trois piliers importants. La première, donc, est la confiance institutionnelle ou la conviction que les autorités agissent dans l'intérêt général. Ensuite, la confiance procédurale, où voilà, les citoyens devraient avoir le sentiment que les procédures fiscales sont stables, prévisibles et équitables. Et donc, dans ce cas, quand les citoyens voient cela, ils sont enclins à coopérer. Et enfin, la confiance réciproque, j'aime dire que c'est celle qui touche vraiment les citoyens quand il s'agit de l'impôt foncier, qui est la conviction ou au moins l'attente que les impôts fonciers se traduiraient en bénéfices tangibles. Et donc, dans ce cas, les contribuables ne voient pas l'impôt foncier comme une charge, mais comme voilà, le contrat social, comme une contribution au contrat social. Et donc, c'est ce troisième pilier sur lequel j'aimerais m'attarder dans ma présentation, notamment vu le fait que l'impôt foncier est très visible pour les citoyens et que cette visibilité provient du fait, donc c'est plutôt un principe, du fait que si on procure plus de services, ceci permet aux propriétés d'augmenter en termes de valeur, ce qui donne plus d'opportunités au gouvernement de mobiliser plus de revenus, dont certains peuvent encore une fois être réinvestis dans les services, et donc ça crée un cercle vertueux ici. Et donc, next slide, donc plusieurs pays ont cherché à renforcer ce lien en inscrivant donc dans leur cadre législatif ou fiscaux ce lien entre l'impôt foncier et les services, mais il devient fragile pour trois raisons. La première provient... Go back. OK. La première provient du fait que, voilà, souvent les recettes qui sont mobilisées ne sont pas suffisantes ou elles sont mal allouées au service. Ce qui veut dire que les gouvernements ont tendance à vraiment allouer très peu, des fois 10%, des fois 20%, ou peut-être un peu plus. Et donc, ceci empêche les citoyens de voir que leurs impôts contribuent au service. D'autre part, on remarque une dépendance considérable des gouvernements locaux envers les transferts intergouvernementaux ou des fois des subventions externes qui viennent aussi avec des conditions quand il s'agit peut-être de les dépenser sur des services où ces services peut-être ne reflèteraient pas les priorités des citoyens. Et il existe aussi souvent un déficit de transparence. Ici, on part du principe que les services sont offerts, mais peut-être qu'ils ne sont pas visibles pour plusieurs raisons, dont le fait que des fois les budgets ne sont pas transparents pour permettre aux contribuables de comprendre à quoi leurs recettes servent. Et donc, à la fin, on se retrouve avec un cercle vicieux de faible conformité, faible recette, faible service. Moins de services signifie encore une fois une faible confiance publique et tout recommence. Alors, dans la prochaine diapo, j'aimerais m'attarder au cas des systèmes centralisés qui sont principalement les pays francophones, où souvent la législation ne crée pas ce lien explicite entre l'impôt foncier et les services, simplement parce que les impôts fonciers doivent être affectés au budget de fonctionnement. C'est tout. Et donc, en plus de ça, on voit une séparation nette entre les administrations fiscales centrales qui s'occupent du recouvrement et les gouvernements locaux qui dépensent. Et dans ce schéma, pas tout le temps, mais en principe, les administrations centrales n'ont pas beaucoup d'incitatifs pour mobiliser plus de revenus. Voilà, des fois, il y a d'autres priorités auxquelles ils doivent répondre. Et les municipalités ne participent pas non plus à la collecte ou peut-être des fois ne sont pas motivées à sensibiliser les citoyens par rapport à cet impôt. Et dans ces contextes aussi, on voit des revenus limités, peu d'espace budgétaire pour les gouvernements locaux pour dépenser certaines de ces ressources sur les services, et ceci ne fait que éroder la confiance publique. Et hier, on a parlé un peu de la collaboration, mais j'aimerais aussi souligner que ce défi donc du faible lien entre les services et les revenus est aussi dû à la faible coordination et collaboration dans ce genre d'activité de sensibilisation de conformité fiscale entre les deux niveaux de gouvernement. Donc, la question qui se pose est de savoir comment renforcer ce lien plus tôt. Donc, j'aimerais proposer 3 stratégies différentes mais complémentaires ici. Donc, la première serait liée à plus de transparence dans la manière de présenter les budgets locaux afin que les citoyens puissent comprendre comment les recettes sont dépensées. Et ceci peut être, par exemple, de mettre à la disposition des citoyens des budgets simples et visuels. C'est fait dans certains cas, mais ça serait quelque chose à continuer à faire. Ça peut être aussi le cas d'afficher des panneaux ou de gros signes, disons, dans des endroits stratégiques des gouvernements locaux ou des villes qui permettent aux citoyens de voir exactement comment est-ce que leurs taxes sont en train d'être utilisées. Vous avez 2 photos ici. L'une, c'est celle d'en bas, la ville de Lagos qui montrait justement, dans certains endroits stratégiques de la ville, à quoi les recettes sont en train de servir, donc des gros projets d'infrastructure, ainsi de suite. Donc, les citoyens auraient le sentiment que les recettes sont utilisées pour de bons services. Et il y a la ville de Chama, on a notre collègue de là qui sera d'ailleurs dans la session d'après. OK. Qui va également, cette ville également a décidé d'augmenter la transparence en concevant des panneaux qui montrent les recettes mobilisées ainsi que les services procurés, des fois avec des photos aussi qui montrent quel genre de services sont procurés ici. Et certes, il y a aussi des mécanismes de gouvernance transparente comme des rencontres citoyennes ou des tableaux de bord numériques que les gouvernements mettent en place des fois pour montrer aux citoyens qu'ils sont en train de travailler en leur intérêt. La deuxième approche est donc l'affectation des recettes. Vous voyez revenue earmarking en anglais, qui notamment consiste à affecter un pourcentage des revenus pour des services précis. Et donc, juste pour donner des exemples, au Kenya, la législation prévoit que 30% des recettes locales doivent être affectées à des projets de développement. En Ouganda, en principe, 75% des recettes fiscales devraient être affectées également à des services qui sont choisis par les citoyens. Et quand il s'agit de l'affectation des recettes, il y a quand même des avantages, dont la transparence et la redevabilité. une plus grande légitimité fiscale et le fait qu'une garantie des ressources reste toujours disponible malgré les circonstances pour des priorités locales. Mais ceci a également des risques. Ouais. Le premier risque est donc le risque de fongibilité, notamment lorsque les recettes sont affectées à un usage précis. Les gouvernements peuvent compenser cette affectation en réduisant le crédit dans d'autres lignes budgétaires, ce qui réduit l'effet net de cette affectation. Il y a une perte de flexibilité budgétaire où donc quand on a affecté les recettes, c'est difficile de les réaffecter à d'autres dépenses plus urgentes. Et si jamais le gouvernement promet d'affecter mais qu'il ne le fait pas, ceci peut aussi nuire à sa crédibilité. Et bien sûr, encore une fois, dans les contextes centralisés, notamment les pays francophones, la législation ne prévoit pas que cette affectation prenne place, ce qui est également un défi. Et la troisième approche qui est également différente mais complémentaire des deux que je viens de présenter, est notamment la budgétisation participative qui permet aux citoyens d'être directement impliqués dans les propositions et choix de projets financés. Et cela rend donc l'usage des recettes plus visible et crédible. Et donc, quand la budgétisation participative est mise en œuvre, encore une fois, elle renforce la redevabilité, elle oriente les dépenses vers des priorités locales et construit un dialogue régulier entre les autorités et les citoyens. Mais encore une fois, il y a des limites à cette approche, notamment dans les grandes villes où des fois, c'est pas évident de mobiliser les citoyens, ou surtout dans les contextes où ces activités sont mises en place à partir de financements externes. Il devient difficile des fois pour le gouvernement de pouvoir les rendre durables. Et donc, l'institutionnalisation, le financement local, mais une base légale claire peuvent notamment aider les gouvernements à maintenir ce genre d'activité. Et donc, pour conclure, la réussite des réformes, comme voilà, j'aimerais peut-être le souligner comme message, que ne dépend pas seulement d'un design, d'une conception technique solide, mais également de la prise en compte des préférences des contribuables. I'm done. Et voilà, de la confiance du public. Et ceci se construit, comme je viens de le dire, à partir de trois leviers: la visibilité des services rendus, la transparence et la redevabilité, ainsi que la participation citoyenne pour notamment briser ce cercle vicieux et plutôt contribuer à un cercle vertueux que vous voyez sur les diapos ici. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci, Colette. Thank you so much. That was really a good start and backdrop for all this conversation that we're going to have. So as to keep the time, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Mrs. Nima Kamara is Director of Planning and Development at the Kanifing Municipal Council in the Gambia. In her role as director for the past 6 years, she has led the council's strategic planning processes, urban development initiatives, and the integration of innovative systems to strengthen municipal governance and service delivery. Under her leadership, the Department of Planning and Development has prioritized modern data-driven approaches to urban management. A key project Nima supervises is the GIS unit's initiative to match property addresses with the council rate database, a reform aimed at enhancing revenue mobilization, improving service delivery, and fostering accountability in municipal administration geared towards improving tax compliance. Mrs. Kamara is passionate about sustainable urban development, institutional capacity building, and the use of technology for smarter, more inclusive city management. Her expertise and experience position her as a key voice in advancing local governance reforms, using planning and data systems in shaping a resilient municipality. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome for Mrs. Nima Kamara.
Good morning. Good morning. Next slide. Yeah, I'll be speaking on the challenges and strategies for increasing compliance and building trust in Canifin. On the overview, Canifin is one of the 8 councils in the Gambia. It's have a population of more than 500,000, and which is about the total population of the country, 16%. It is considered the most densely municipality in the Gambia. It is economically vital because it have most of the major economic hubs in the Gambia. It is also responsible for essential service deliveries such as waste collection, public space management, and market management under the Local Government Act. Property tax is one of the highest potential revenue sources to enable service delivery in Canifing. Next, please. Here, the graph is showing the potential of rates, rates and taxes in Canifing against the trade license, the market income, and the car park. The other below is showing the income rate in the from 2016 to 2025. In 2016, the compliance rate was at 32%, and as 2023, it's at 33, the same in 2024, and in 2025, as in June, from January to June, it has rise to 31%, and which we are hoping to at least increase before the end of the year. So some of these strategies and initiatives Canifing have come up on trying to improve on compliance is Canifing have made an initiative called the Mbalit Project. Mbalit in our local language means waste. It invested about $131 million, which is close to $2 million US. In 2019, the council procured 30 fleets and branded all the fleets. As you can see, those are the fleets, and on the collection, it was pegged at a minimum rate of $10 per bag, which is about below $5, below $2. So every ward, we have 19 wards. Every ward in the municipality has one truck, and there was 2 backup trucks to support the initiative. So during the process, the EIS office developed a map to support the routes for the trucks, and this map shows all the 19 wards, and then developed a route map for all the trucks to access these wards. So during the process, we also Canifing also have an engagement with the Ministry of Information that have support from Google Plus code, and have Google Plus codes within the municipality of Canifing on all gates of all properties of the Canifing, which also supported council to also develop more on that. So, and we also had an initiative and a support from the University of Essex to collaborate in 2024 to 2026, which is an ongoing project. This project is supporting Canifing in matching our database. We have a rates database which do not have the plus codes. So this project is supporting the council in matching the database, the rates database with the created with the base map that we have. And then on this, it's also identifying each property with the plus code. So as you can see, the map, the map on the with the yellow spots is the Virgin map, and the map that have been matched is every match property will turn to white. As you can see, since during the process, 16,000 properties have been matched since the process started. So the Essex process also, the Essex projects is also supporting Canifing in trying to improve on compliance, which we believe that improving on the social contract will help us improve on the compliance rate. So the Essex projects have found Canifing to be at a low tax rate with a limited service delivery, which we have which shows a weak social contract rate. And then by the end of the project, we expect to at least have an improved service delivery which will be supported with a high tax rate, and then the compliance rate will be improved, and then we can create a better social contract with the community of Kanifing. So the key considerations, we also believe that digitalization will be one of the key considerations that Kanifing should put in place so that we can support in improving compliance. Because digitalizing will introduce e-payments and data systems to make tax collection simpler and more transparent. And also we expect to have Kanifing to improve on capacity building when this data digital transformation is introduced. We expect all the staffs that are connected to this system to be trained so that we can understand more on this, so that it can improve on efficiency in service delivery. We also consider for Kanifing to create more public awareness, to communicate more and interact more with the citizens of Kanifing, to convince them to pay their taxes and to have better trust with Kanifing. So creating this better trust is very important, because citizens need to understand why they are paying their taxes and what the council is doing for them. Because the waste collection is a key investment council have gone into since in the past years. So we also, on this waste collection, we have realized that the trucks have finding it difficult to access some areas. In these areas, we are hoping that Kanifing should try to see how best to increase in the equalities in waste collection so that the trucks can access these remote areas, because we also have some areas that are called the riverine areas. Some people are settling in those areas. So the trucks are having it very difficult to access these areas. That is why we are also having some innovations of trying to introduce that tricycles so that they can be accessing these areas so that everybody will be serviced equally. So I thank you very much. That was what I have from Kanifing. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much, Nima, for telling us all about the initiatives that you've been using in Kanifing. Okay, so our next presenter is Rosetta Wilson. Rosetta is a chartered accountant with over 25 years of senior leadership experience spanning the private sector, public service, and local government. She currently serves as team lead for Sierra Leone's property tax program under LoGRI, where she guides strategic implementation, stakeholder engagement, and institutional strengthening. Prior to this role, Rosetta served as Senior Financial Management Advisor to the Mayor of Freetown and led revenue mobilization within the Mayor's Delivery Unit. Her career has been defined by a commitment to strengthening fiscal systems, enhancing transparency, advancing business development, and re-engineering public sector processes for greater efficiency and impact. Ladies and gentlemen, Rosetta Wilson.
Good morning. Just going to see if the slides work. Where should we point? There? I hope I'm not pointing in anyone's eyes. Is that there? No? Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll say next slides. Good morning, everyone, again. So I'm going to be talking about the Sierra Leone experience. Whenever I want to say Sierra Leone, I want to start with Freetown, but it's the Sierra Leone experience. And before I do that, I will tell you a bit, just give you, for those who are not familiar with the Sierra Leone story, just a brief overview. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I just thought, oh, okay, thank you. I hope you can hear me clearer. So in terms of Freetown, Kenema and McKinney. Some of you were in the other presentation we did yesterday. We talked about the 3 cities where reform has happened. So in Freetown, it was 2020, in Kenema, 2024, and in McKinney City in 2025. So very broad terms in terms of revenue. What have we achieved in Freetown? So revenue potential has increased 5-fold. In Kenema City, is increased 3.5 folds, 3.5 times, and in McKinney, 1.5 times. Our property database has grown by those approximate levels as well across the 3 cities. And I just wanted to share compliance levels where we started in year 1. And we can look at Freetown because of timing. At the end, you would see I only focus on Freetown. Our compliance levels were 38%, in Kenema 45%, and McKinney, this is just the first year post-reform, so we don't have that available as yet. Next slide, please. In continuing with the overview, I just wanted to share with you some of the key objectives that Freetown wanted to achieve, or Sierra Leone in general, when they went for the property tax reform. So we wanted to strengthen data coverage, and I think this is similar for across the sub-region in why we wanted to achieve this. So we wanted to address the lack of a comprehensive property database. Freetown, for instance, and the other cities had fewer than 50% of properties captured in the database. We wanted to modernize evaluation methods, replace outdated, purely manual area-based processes, and that would introduce fairer, transparent, and progressive market-informed assessments. We digitized the administrative process, and I think we've heard that for other cities as well. So we transitioned from a manual system to a streamlined digital workflow to improve efficiency, transparency, and traceability. So across all the stages of the property tax system, we've digitized. And then to establish a reliable address system. We did not have a comprehensive address system in cities, and that would enable accurate property identification, and even the delivery of bills have been automated. So having a reliable system helps with that. And that ensures fair and transparent assessment. So build a progressive and equitable framework for property valuation, and that's our point-based methodology. And as part of that, the city was quite interested to build a robust and consistent enforcement framework. And we can look at that in details when Nico is presenting, but we know that all of these are the various ingredients you need, as we've heard from Titilola and Colette about what increases trust and compliance. And then enhance revenue sustainability and resilience. So for most cities across the board, property tax is the key revenue, owns this revenue. So to be able to do that and link tax collection to improve service delivery, which is what Colette was talking about, would increase local resilience and sustaining the reform and ensuring compliance and building trust by your taxpayers. Next slide, please. So why did trust matter in the Sierra Leone context? Yeah. So trust is not just a nice to have. And I think we're realizing that as we hear from our successive presenters. It's foundational, where taxpayers perceive the tax system as fair, transparent, and linked to tangible benefits. This is what Colette was talking about. They're far more likely to comply voluntarily. In Sierra Leone, when we look at the next slides, we'll see some of the examples of the frameworks that have been put in place to improve fairness, equity, accountability, and transparency. And when taxpayers trust the system, and they have evidence to show that services are provided consistently, and investment have been made, and they're part of that decision-making process, then they're more likely to comply. However, if you don't have a consistent enforcement system, and we would see that in the results we see in the next preceding slides, then taxpayers would just, fall down along the wayside. They start to comply, and without that enforcement being consistent, they will not continue to comply. But enforcement alone cannot build legitimacy. It must be paired with citizen engagement, clear communication. Taxpayers want to see the standard you set for service delivery and how you've performed against them in publishing those results. And then taxpayers must not suspect favoritism as it erodes trust. In Freetown, the first year of the reform was in 2020. That was during the COVID epidemic. Now, most weak leaders would have said, let's not go ahead with the reform. But the mayor held the ground despite taxes being increased, and we went ahead with the reform in 2020. However, what was decided initially was to target bill delivery at just the top 50% of the taxpayers, and they're the highest value of taxpayers. Unfortunately, most of the high-value taxpayers had seen an increase in their tax bills, and the next 50% had actually seen a reduction in their tax bills. But so when the bills went out to the high-value taxpayers, of course, there was a public outcry because they're the ones that had seen. But we thought that just handing out the bills to the sub 50% would cushion the effects for the low-value taxpayers. This didn't work out. You know, everyone was coming out in social media saying the taxes had gone up in the midst of the COVID pandemic. That this was really, it sparked public outcry. So we had to pivot and had public town halls. Then it had to be digital town halls. The mayor had to come out to explain the reasons why, you know, that had happened. And then we decided then that it needed to, the remaining 50% of tax bills had to go out, because when it went out, people then saw that you know, taxes for the lower 50% had actually seen a reduction, because a tax reform is not all about increasing taxes. Some people actually see a reduction in their taxes. So we must lead by example as well. That's a second point to note. So when influential property owners are seen to pay, it sends a powerful signal. I'll give an example. In our second city in Kenema, the mayor was a bit reluctant to have his property assessed. And we had to have some conversations with him to say, you set the example, you set the trend here. And if people see that your house is assessed and is part of the process, then they are more willing to. And I'm happy to say that he consented to have his house assessed and valued. So trust. Sustainability equals to trust, compliance, and legitimacy. So I have to speed up. I was being a bit complacent here. Next slide. I'll move to the next slide. So these are the ingredients for trust. And this is the analogy that I used for Sierra Leone. The ingredients we have for trust are fairness, equity, linking revenue to service delivery, accountability and transparency, and communication, clear communication to your taxpayer from the example I just gave you, but being clear about why taxes are going up and so on. Communication and taxpayer education, and participation and consultation, which is participatory budgeting. Colette spoke about that in brief. So let's move to the next slide. Now, I just wanted to give you a status in terms of where we are in Freetown in terms of these different ingredients. Fairness and equity. Are we there yet? Do we have all these ingredients? The short answer is no. We do not. We only have some of them, but we're working towards them. In terms of fairness and equity, I think we have, by having the property tax reform ensured that we had the points-based valuation methodology that has informed fairness, equity, and progressivity. In terms of linking revenue to services, no, we're not quite there yet. So even though cities like Freetown are providing, and all the three cities actually are providing services to taxpayers, it lacks a framework for taxpayer involvement in the process. Even though we did a pilot on participatory budgeting in Freetown, it has not been extended. And Freetown has committed to giving 20% of all revenues generated to be spent in that particular city. That was part of the pilot we did for participatory budgeting. That hasn't happened. So we're working now with Freetown to try and create a framework to do that. Communication and education, accountability and transparency. I think I've spoken about that a bit. By having a digitized and automated process, I think that's done. Additionally, we have a detailed reporting that taxpayers can ask for. So if you need to know how your taxes are calculated, you can request for that, and a detailed report will be provided to you to do that. Communication and education in progress. We're working on it in terms of communication, but we do need, the cities need a multi-layered multimedia sensitization strategy. Build a robust and consistent enforcement framework. That's in progress as well. So strengthen compliance to clear procedures, legacies. We also need that to happen. I think Nico will talk to you about what we're doing about that in Kenema. Hopefully that could be extended to other cities. And I think I've talked about participation and consultation here, where we had the framework for participatory budgeting, but that has not been fully extended. So that needs to also happen for things to move forward. Next slide, please. So just want to share, next slide. Yeah, the compliance levels. Yeah. These are the compliance levels that Sierra Leone has achieved, that Freetown, sorry, has achieved over the next 4 years. And as you can see, the compliance level is a decline. This signals that reforms are technically sound, but there's a trust gap that remains. It started off well in 2021 and progressively deteriorated. So without a structured and consistent enforcement framework, taxpayers see taxation as a contribution and not an obligation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Rosetta. Round of applause for Rosetta, please. Great. So next, we will have Nicolo Meriigi. Nicolo is a senior research fellow at the Center for Study of African Economies in the Department of Economics at the University of Oxford. He is a development economist with regional focus on sub-Saharan Africa. In his work, Nicolo uses experimental methods to study the mechanisms of institutional development in fragile states, with particular focus on deepening understanding of how such positive institutional change happen, how it evolves, how it is sustained, and its impact on development outcomes. Nicolo's research is embedded in policy reforms and development interventions stemming from fruitful partnerships with policymakers, donors, development agencies, and practitioners. And so his work sits at the intersection of development economics, primary, political economy, and public economics. A brilliant researcher, his work has been published in many reputable journals, including the American Economic Review, the Journal of Development Economics, Nature, and Science Advances. Ladies and gentlemen, Nico Meriigi.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Titilola, for such a flattering introduction. Didn't know those things about myself. Anyway, my presentation builds on very much on what Rosetta has presented about Sierra Leone, and it's looking into a very applied case about how to increase tax compliance, mostly using enforcement. It is worth mentioning that it is part of a broader effort looking into how these modernized property tax administration systems can be used to increase compliance, improve compliance in a fair, transparent, and trustworthy way. My presentation is sitting somewhere between research and policy. So it is really like an academic study with policy implications. And in the spirit of LoGRI, it's highly collaborative, both with our godfather, Will, and our colleague, Pablo at the University of Stanford University, but also with Kenema City Council, the Interreligious Council, and the Council of Chiefs. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So, as we've heard from Rosetta, there has been an incredible effort and an incredible reform in Sierra Leone that has really basically modernized the property tax administration system, making it more equitable, more fair, basically like ticking all the boxes of best practice, right? But also like improving and modernizing a lot of the functionalities of the property tax administration system. I will not get into what Rosetta said already, so we move to the next slide. And all right, so in a nutshell, like this new property tax administration system is really like quintuple the revenue potential, double the revenue collection, made so in a way that is progressive, made so in a way that citizens have been engaged and trust has been built. Although we are not there yet, we can agree that it has improved a lot, right? Now, in spite of all these incredible efforts, there are two features that stand out in these systems, right? One that is from the previous slide, not the one that you're seeing here. Don't worry, you can leave it there. Is that the one of the key features of those administration system is the digitalization of records for payments. And so, like, what this does, it allows with very minimal effort to know who has paid their taxes, who's not. It allows to identify very easily defaulters, and all defaulters are geolocated. And because properties are not movable, government know where they are, right? Now, the other one is on the next slide, right? Is that in spite of all of this, what we are seeing, as Rosetta was mentioning, is still like very low tax compliance compared to the revenue potential. So basically, like, we have all the tools, we have what we sometimes refer to as the Cadillac of property tax administration system, enormous potential, but like compliance is limited, right? And next slide, this is really what has started the conversation with Kenema City Council in terms of really saying all the ingredients are there, compliance is low, what can we do? You know who's paying, you know who's not, you know where they are. We know that enforcement is extremely effective, right? And shall we try and do something about it? And this is really like what we did. We discussed possible models for improving tax compliance with Kenema City Council. Next slide. And we tested two, or like a simple proof of concept. Simple proof of concept. One was a simple, sometimes we refer to it as a frugal enforcement process, right? Where taxpayers receive official notices escalating into court summons and court hearings, and I will say more about it. Another one is what we refer to as a religious intervention or religious encouragement, where religious leaders visit defaulters door to door, stressing the importance of paying taxes for the well-being of the community, and also like legitimizing the reforms, really like building the trust. Because we were fearing that the enforcement alone might erode trust, we thought that maybe like we should combine those two approaches rather than using one or the other. So we also looked at the interaction. Now, again, I mentioned this has been done with an amazing, an incredible collaboration with Kenema City Council, the Interreligious Council, and the Council of Chiefs. And the Council of Chiefs is coming in a minute, right? And in the next slide, we see like what the design looks like. We really treated this like an academic, like a very scientific exercise. And we have, of all defaulters, we have some that are in a pure control group, like status quo, business as usual. Then we have a group that is assigned to the enforcement approach, one that is assigned to the religious encouragement approach, and then the combination of the two. I will be focusing on the enforcement alone because it's the one thing that we want to show how very simple intervention can really have big and quite long-lasting results, right? Next slide. The enforcement intervention is very simple. It consists of 2 letters and 1 deterrent that consists of a court hearing. Here you're seeing the first letter. So the letters are sequential. You see the first letter is a tax enforcement notice. Basically, after the deadline for payments, we know who has paid and who has not. And some people will receive a letter saying, Kenema City Council knows that you have not paid. You have up to this date to pay. Otherwise, we will escalate to the next action. Next slide. The next action being a court summon. The court summon being, hey, when you didn't pay, you received this letter saying that you should pay by this date. You have decided not to pay. You have up to this date to pay. Otherwise, you will be called to court, right? Again, just a letter. Then, if we can move to the next slide, the court summon comes. This is like some of the paperwork related to the court summon. And if you can move to the next slide, here is what the courts look like. So in Sierra Leone, the call it traditional court or like the main courts are very busy. They will not have the time to deal with property tax issues. But the Local Government Act allow for the chiefs to exercise their authority in matters related to local development, including local taxation. So what we did, we worked with the Council of Chiefs to set up temporary, 2 weeks only court where paramount chiefs were asked to preside over matters related to defaulters in property taxation. So what it means, you create a deterrent. It's very simple. You tell people that they will appear to court in front of the chief if they don't pay their tax, right? And if they fail to pay their tax, then next slide, the Local Council Act makes provision for assets equivalent to the value of the amount owed to be confiscated. It's not a lot, right? If you see, like, those are some of the items that were confiscated as a result of the court. But in the next slide, we see the results. The results being an incredible jump in tax compliance. We go from 14.6 compliance rates in control to 68% compliance amongst those that have been subject to the enforcement action, right? But that is not it, because then the neighbors were seeing that people were taken to court or people were receiving those letters. So what did they do? They started paying their tax as well. So we see an increase of 10 percentage points in compliance also amongst the neighbors, right? And now you might be asking, well, how did people perceive it? We were not just observing compliance rate from the tax administration system, but we were also collecting information about the way people perceive Panama City Council, the property tax, and all the proceedings related to the property tax. And it turns out that residents actually improve their attitudes towards taxation. They see that in spite of enforcement, the system was perceived as more fair, right? And also like more transparent and understandable. And there was no political backlash whatsoever. Like, so all the things that one might fear about, oh, people are going to start protesting, they're going to start complaining. There was actually not that much complaint or nothing that we could measure, and we tried to measure it very, very well, right? So just to put things in perspective, I presented only the enforcement, but like there was also the religious intervention. The religious intervention did increase tax compliance, but very little. So like compared to other intervention, it was quite substantial because it improved compliance by 5 percentage points, but it dwarfs compared to a 54 percentage point effect on enforcement, right? So what are the takeaways? The takeaways is that simple enforcement is possible. It really works. And MIA is also quite easy. So enforcement, if we think about compliance, really is the missing link between revenue potential and actually revenue collection. All this modernization of the property tax systems, the technologies make the identification of defaulters very easy. So like it requires very limited effort from the tax administration because you don't need to spend too much time searching who's paying, who's not. You have it in front of your screen. You know where people are. Just a matter of getting there, right? And then building trust doesn't mean avoiding enforcement. It means doing it transparently, systematically, and rigorously, right? So that it cannot be objective. And then, of course, like as we've heard in previous presentation, local context and cross-institutional collaboration really matters. This was possible because of the collaboration between the local council and the Council of Chiefs, right? And those things are really important. And that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're going to now take a few questions. I'm going to pose a few questions to the panel, just so that we can sort of deepen some of the areas that we've been talking about. So I'm going to come to you first, Colette. So from what you presented, it looks like building trust through reciprocity is essential, yeah? But in reality, local governments have very little funds, which they need also to build this trust. So how do you begin to break the cycle, you know, the vicious cycle that I described earlier between low trust, low services and all? Because with low revenues, local governments don't really have that much resources to provide services and to, you know, the reciprocity side. So how do you break this cycle?
Thank you very much for this question. And I guess in answering it, I would say that there is perhaps no unique or no perfect answer, in the sense that all really depends on what government can do, and government can use different approaches that in some ways can be complementary. But the key message is all has to start from government, most of the time local governments. And I would say that maybe one of the most effective ways to do that is to use the already available resources, to really use them in a more visible and accountable way. And I am providing this answer by being inspired by our colleagues from the Malawi city councils that I was discussing with yesterday, who shared that in 2 city councils, the first one being Muzuzu, they have been putting a very small share of revenues aside to then spend that every 3 months in 2 communities, which means that when that money is available, they'll work with communities to decide on what services they should spend that money on. Lilongwe City has also used an approach called ring fencing, where they have been putting, again, a small share of revenues in a separate bank account, just to make sure that that money is really outside of the general budget. And once this money is available, it's distributed to all the wards in the council, and councillors or local elected officials work with citizens to decide what kind of services they think they should implement. Of course, sometimes revenues are not enough, but this really has been like a small step to make sure that some revenues are being used and that the government is working for taxpayers. There is also, if I may say, the role of central government. And I'm saying that because, again, when I presented, I highlighted that many local governments depend on central government grants and transfers sometimes for specific services. Those grants can be conditional or unconditional, and perhaps there is a way of designing those grants in a way that they reward also accountability, transparency, but also efficiency in service delivery, to then encourage really councils to spend more on services and then keep receiving those kind of grants. And another thing sometimes is not about bringing more revenues. And I guess this is also inspired by the work that we have done with many local governments, but also my research, where sometimes much of the revenues are used, especially for, again, operation expenses, but mainly staff salaries. And in this case, when the wage bill is high, most of the time it can also be caused by overhiring, as we know, for many reasons, some being political. And in this case, perhaps a clear expenditure review to just see exactly where the money is going, where maybe there may be some cuts to ensure that more is diverted to services, can also be a good way to ensure that they're really breaking that cycle. And maybe this is something that will be expanded on by our colleague here from Canifing, where governments are also having opportunities to build partnerships with external actors to be able to get some grants, perhaps not loan for now, but I will just talk about grants. Of course, within the limits of the legislation, to then also be able to use that. Key being providing services, ensuring to make them feasible so that the taxpayer can say that, okay, we think we can trust this council to then also provide more services if we pay our taxes. And I would like to conclude by saying that political commitment is key here, or political leadership, to make sure that when a government commits to doing those things, they are really implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. That's really great. Political commitment. But then I think I hear you also talking about discipline in those councils. And then, you know, the wage bill, something to watch out for. Okay, I'll come to you now, Nima. You already spoke about efforts to build trust through the ballot project in Canifing, but we understand revenues are not enough to provide even more services, okay? So what funding mechanisms or partnerships has the council leveraged to support service delivery efforts and demonstrate to taxpayers that their councils are actually working for them?
Thank you very much for that. You are right. The revenues are really low. Funding is really challenged at the council level. So we are also trying to leverage on other funding mechanisms to partner to build better partnership with funding partners that do support us. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had support from the EU. We had a project called Canifing Environmental Transformation Project. This project supported the council in providing services that we render to our people, which were not directly on the tax collected, or the support we're supposed to get from government. In the Gambia, we are entitled to have 25% of our development tax as grant from the government, which is not forthcoming. Okay. Yeah. So we are also struggling on that part. Council totally leveraging on tax collection, especially property tax. So on those service deliveries, we are also trying more to develop better partnership on this. We also had some funding from Bloomberg to also support to see how best we can extend the service delivery, especially on the waste management. In the Gambia, we have it is law for every council to spend 60% of its collection on service delivery and 40% on recurrent. But the percentage out of the 60% we are spending technically 55% of it on waste management. Waste management is really a challenge. So that is why the meager resources we are getting are mostly going on waste management. So the service delivery part is really low. That is why we are realizing a very low compliance on the tax payment of tax. So on this also, we also had some support through the Essex project that we partner with to support us. As you can see, we are currently matching properties. Although we are not having the 25% we are supposed to have from government, we believe in still expanding on trying to see how best to have all our properties within the municipality in a database that will support us to get the tax from all these properties, because not all the properties are also within in the database. The database we have is very limited, but with the matching of these properties with the Essex project, we are really seeing a dividend. It's a very at a slow pace, but at least we have realized 5% increment in the compliance rate, because most of the properties within the municipality we are not registered, but now being identified and being within in the database is supporting to get these revenues from them. But like I said, we are building a very good partnership with partners that we are supporting. We are working with LoGRI will not be an exception, and then with other development partners too. So we are hoping that it's slow, but with time will definitely get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nima. That's really very insightful. And I'm so, it's thrilling to see all the efforts that you're making. Yes, I think it's interesting, though, that it's mostly donor supported. I wondered if you had, done anything maybe with the private sector or other strategies, but let's put that on the back burner. I'm going to go to Rosetta. So from your presentation, Rosetta, we could see that compliance without arrears has been increasing. If enforcement has been weak in Freetown and services inconsistent, why do citizens still comply? It seems like some kind of conundrum there. So please explain.
Thank you, Titi Lola. So this question gets to the heart of what makes tax systems work, not just technically, but socially and politically. In African cities, as we've heard already, enforcement capacity is limited and service delivery is uneven at best. Yet citizens comply. We see that there's a level of compliance that we see. Why does that happen? And I just want to pick in the Sierra Leone context three reasons for that. The first is civic identity and social norms. And some citizens pay because they see it as a civic duty. They just want to comply because it's their civic responsibility to do that. They believe in contributing to the common, to the collective good. So even when the system is not perfect, they still want to pay. In Sierra Leone, especially in Freetown, we have our taxpayers who we call early taxpayers. So they consistently pay their bills even before the tax bills are issued. In fact, our tax bills go out in January, February for the different cities, but these taxpayers start paying in December. They start paying their bills because they take it very seriously and they would pay that consistently every year. So that's the first. The second is trust in future improvements. So others pay because they believe the potential of the government to improve. They may not see the immediate benefits, but they trust that the reforms will eventually deliver. For instance, I give an example for taxpayers in Freetown because of their trust in the mayor's Transform Freetown agenda. They believe that it will come around. She will do good. They've seen some indications of it. They see that the streets are being swept. The number of streets being swept are increasing. So even though it's not consistent, they trust in future improvement, so they will pay. And the final point I want to say is about strategic compliance. I think Nico mentioned in his presentation about, the neighbor effect. When your neighbors see that others get a letter, they would sort of pay. So some pay to secure property rights as well. They want to show their piece of paper to say, I've paid my bill and I own this property. So they would make that payment. And some pay because they want to avoid future penalties. So even though in Sierra Leone, when we did the implementation, we simplified the penalty system. There's still a small percentage. If you don't pay, you get a 5% penalty. So people are scared of that building up. So they would pay, and to maintain good standing with local authorities, even if enforcement is weak, they will continue to pay. So those are the three things I'll say: civic identity, social norms, trust in future improvements, and strategic compliance. But here's the challenge. When trust is eroded, when citizens feel the system is unfair, it's opaque, or disconnected with their daily lives, it's only a matter of time. The compliance will collapse, as we've seen in the case of Freetown, where we started off well, but it's slowly reducing. So that's why building public trust isn't a side issue. It's in the center of the reform. It's important to note that reforms are possible, especially what we've seen in Sierra Leone across the 3 cities. And it's already visible there, but we need to work on the other ingredients as we've talked about: compliance, building public trust, linking service revenue to service delivery, for that to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosetta. Really very insightful. So that explains that very clearly. And I think I find most interesting the fact that some people just pay. That's just who they are. So very interesting indeed. Okay, coming to you now, Nicolo. What does your research project and other existing research say about the complementarity of enforcement measures, sensitization, and other measures towards tax compliance? Okay, is enforcement needed at all? I think we already know the answer, but more importantly, what's the extent to which enforcement alone can suffice, and what should then be combined with enforcement to really make it effective?
Thank you very much. And I will try to be brief and very straight to the point and give you very assertive answers. The first one is that no, enforcement alone will not suffice, right? But we also know that without enforcement, compliance is pretty low. So like the complementarities are evident. I think that in the presentation, I was discussing more about the technical complementarities between the property tax administration system and enforcement. So this ability to detect the properties, to track the payments across tax cycles, right? But then it's also extremely important to do more of what perhaps Rosetta was mentioning, which is like this sensitization and this clear communication with the taxpayer about why taxes are being paid, how they're being used, but perhaps also most importantly, in the long run and thinking about the dynamics of compliance and thinking about the sustained effect of enforcement. Enforcement, we don't have the data yet, right? But one can think based on other models that enforcement is not going to sustain if the citizens do not see the services. So like we have to think about the fiscal exchange. We have to think about like all the communication, like being effective, being, transparent, creating the trust. But the best way to build the trust is really show where the money is spent. And that is what is going to determine in the long run if enforcement will continue to work as much as it did in the short run.
Wow, that was so brief. Okay, thank you, Nico. Very brief, but very clear. So I'm hearing from this panel that reciprocity is at the heart of making this sustainable for the future. Nico's just told us that enforcement really doesn't work in the long run if people don't see where the money is spent. And I think Colette, started us off with that thought around reciprocity and how important it is. We heard from Yima about them wanting to provide services, but not having enough money to do so and having to employ also strategies to try to continue to provide the services so that compliance can go up. And of course, we've heard about what's happened in Freetown. So very interesting, many thoughts. And I am so certain that there are many questions on your minds. So please, if you have any questions, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come to the floor and take questions. So if you just kindly give a show of hand, and I will send the microphone to you. Gentleman over there, and then the lady here, and then Jalia over there. So we'll take 3 questions in this first round, and then I'll come to this side. So 1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much. Interesting presentations. I have learned a lot. But I have about 3 questions, and for Sierra Leone and our sister from Gambia. Most of the times, my experience is that any project that has donor funding support or technical support, the challenge has always been that anytime those support systems are gone, sustainability becomes a challenge. How do you manage that in both countries? How would you manage that? And then for Gambia, you talked about, I think that your project was linked to waste management, but you also highlighted the issue of roads, poor quality of roads. So I'm just wondering whether you had any collaboration with the ministry or organization that is in charge of roads to be able to take that part, because without the roads, the Waste Management Trust cannot move. So maybe you could address that. And then to Nicolo, Have you had instances where defaulters refuse to appear before the traditional courts? And if they do, what are the sanctions and what are the penalties for refusing to appear? And does defaulters also have a right to refuse to go to the traditional court and prefer to go to the formal courts? Thank you very much.
All right. Je vais dire en français, il y a deux commentaires en ligne. Voilà. Donc, je vais les lire. Ce sont des commentaires de Monsieur Apollinaire Bois de la Côte d'Ivoire, qui est directeur du cadastre. Donc, le premier commentaire est que l'instauration de la confiance, selon lui, ne doit pas seulement être regardée en aval, au niveau des dépenses, mais aussi en amont au niveau de la fiscalité, par une participation inclusive de tous les redevables de l'impôt foncier à travers l'élargissement exhaustif de l'assiette, ce qui, selon lui, passe nécessairement par l'utilisation de nouvelles technologies et aussi de l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, le deuxième commentaire a trait au système centralisé, comme la Côte d'Ivoire, où il explique, donc c'est un peu différent par exemple du Sierra Leone et d'autres pays décentralisés, où il explique qu'il est difficile dans ce système d'évaluer l'utilisation des ressources affectées aux collectivités, puisqu'elles sont libres de les utiliser comme elles veulent, soit dans le fonctionnement, soit dans l'investissement. Et donc, le critère de la confiance se mesure au moment des élections, ce qui n'est pas un critère objectif et fiable. Donc voilà, merci Monsieur Bois pour ces deux commentaires.
Thank you very much to all the presenters. So many exciting things that came out of it and so many questions for me, but I'll just keep it brief and to one question for now. As we've been talking about trust and service delivery, and at the same time talking about digitalization, one of the things that I was thinking about is whether we have thought about trust from a digitalization perspective, in the sense that it's making the systems easier, it's being more transparent, but I wonder about whether you have any experience, whether any of you have an experience about the kind of trust of using these digital technologies from the taxpayer perspective. Like, do we have an experience about what they feel about it, how they trust it or distrust the system? And I'd really be keen to hear more around that issue. But thank you very much again.
Thank you very much for those questions. I'm going to go to Nima. So if you just take the first question that was talking about post, well, I think your first one is probably just a comment really saying that post donor intervention, how do you sustain reform? So it's a comment, but you may wish to, to respond to that comment, but then also to then talk about waste management and the link to road infrastructure. I think Nima first, and then if any of the other panelists would like to speak to that, please. Before we take the last question, which is on defaulters, third question, which is on defaulters refusing to appear in court, in the traditional courts. That will go to Nico. And then finally, we'll take the last question, which is really around the use of digitalization and how people trust these new digital AI systems. So I think I'll leave that open to all of us if we have any experiences to share in that. So Nima, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, as much as we have limited resources, we are always trying to see how to deliver services to our people so that we can at least, we eventually build the trust. It's very slow, but at least we are working towards that. Last year in 2024, the council have signed a contract for road development, of a $300 million a project. It was supposed to run for 5 years. But it's been 1 year, but the process is very slow because we don't have the capacity and the technicality in road development. But we are also partnering and working very closely with the National Road Authority, which is the national authority that's responsible for road development. As we speak, we are collaborating with the Ministry of Roads. They are supporting the council to see how best we can see this project, if in effect, and materialize so that the community of Kanifing can have access to these roads. And it will also eventually support the service delivery, which is the waste trucks, the Mbalit project, to easily access these locations that are very difficult to be accessed by the trucks.
Thank you. Yeah, go on.
Hi, to your question about sustainability, just wanted to say from the Sierra Leone perspective, right from the beginning, one of the, key objectives of the reform is to build sustainability, because you're right in that, once the funds are gone, the councils are expected to run the system. Once the project team is out, they need to run the system. So in trying to build sustainability, not that it's easy, please don't take this as sort of vanilla and it's very easy to happen. We work very earlier on to build sustainability and develop the capacity within the council. So that's part of it. So once the reform is done, the first thing we do is to develop a sustainability plan. How do we then successfully hand this over to the councils when we're not there? So we try to work on creating an institutional capacity, institutional knowledge, build standard operating procedures for them. So across all the different processes, we leave that with them, work with them to ensure that when we're not there, they're able to run all the different aspects and processes of that system. And also, as we've said, build, especially where they're lacking in the councils in Sierra Leone, we have human capacity, which is really challenging, especially in the IT side. And what we're trying to do now is to bring central government into all of this. So especially now that we've completed in the 3 cities, what can the central government do to ensure sustainability is maintained? How we need help with, supporting these 3 councils. So they're also being brought into the discussion as part of that. That, in short, is what we do in Sierra Leone.
Thank you very much, Rosetta, for that. So I'm going to go to the third question, which is around when defaulters refuse to turn up in court. And then also perhaps you might have some insight on how citizens perceive digitalization and the use of AI. First you and then everybody else if you want to contribute.
Fantastic. And I'll be brief, but I'll also take the liberty to address like the first question in relation to sustainability, because in the case of Sierra Leone, the property tax reform has been very lucky to enjoy sustained support for over 5 years from our colleagues from FCDO. And that has been extremely important for creating the conditions of handover that Rosetta was mentioning. So basically, like, there has been a phase of building capacity to the point where responsibility can be transferred. And there is a dynamic that is extremely important. And I think that government, much as donor, need to think about it when they start discussing and are deciding whether to support the project. It's not just in and out. Sustainability is not going to work otherwise, right? So that is. Then on the enforcement and the refusal of defaulters to show up at court, yes, they can refuse. They cannot appear. And they also have the option in this beautiful tax administration system built in Sierra Leone to go to an appeal desk that is open as part of the reform at council in case there are mistakes, in case they disagree. So there is this type of engagement, right? And then this is in the genuine case when there are genuine reasons for the defaulters not to show up in court. There's also some defaulters that are just hard defaulters. It doesn't matter what you do, they will not pay. And then it becomes a bit of a dynamic in terms of how much worth is it to pursue this defaulter. If somebody owes $5, $6, $7, $20, like this, well, we're gonna try again next year. We're not gonna. But if it's a big defaulter, then it's different, right? And it will need to be a case by case type of approach where, you know, you get into de facto like some sort of tax bargaining or tax negotiation, right? And on the AI, we don't have much of these experiences on the AI technology. Okay. So, but in terms of the technology, like I think that is a very good case, because if we are thinking about when we started introducing those reforms in Sierra Leone, there were a lot of doubts, right? There were a lot of questions. There were even like a lot of, call it, disagreements about what was the right approach. But again, like these engagements of the taxpayer, you know, like we created the town halls, we created digital town halls. There have been like a lot of radio show, TV show that were really like explaining the feature of the tax administration system, taking questions live from the taxpayers. I remember even the mayor at the time on Twitter addressing comments one by one, which was incredible, right? And I think that, you know, the skepticism is fair, it's part of the process, and it's about how you address it. And, you know, there's best practice. But Rosetta may want to say something about it.
Thank you. No, I have to go back to take another round of questions, otherwise we'll not get to the other questions at all. So because we have very little time left, I'm going to take 2 questions in this round. I'll take Lanre up front and the gentleman right there in the middle there with his hand up. Could you go to them very quickly, please?
Thank you very much. My question is to you, Dr. Colette. When you were talking about earmarking from the revenues for property tax, I think you mentioned Kenya. I wanted to know how that works in terms of, is that in the law? What makes it, happen? And from your experience, has there been situations whereby that percentage was actually not executed? Because again, what happens, any punitive measure to not actually meeting that percentage? Because if you don't, again, it creates a problem of trust. So how do you address that? So thank you.
Thank you. And quickly to the other gentleman, please. Very quickly, the other gentleman in the middle there. Very quickly, please.
Merci beaucoup pour tout ce que vous avez dit tout au long de ce panel. Je peux continuer? OK. Merci beaucoup. J'ai une question à l'endroit de Madame Colette qui parlait de la redevabilité qui n'était pas très perceptible dans les pays francophones. Parce qu'elle disait que les recettes issues des impôts fonciers ne participaient pas directement au service public, mais étaient utilisées plutôt pour des dépenses de fonctionnement. Alors, j'ai un petit commentaire à faire à ce niveau. Il se fait que dans les pays francophones, comme le Bénin, il y a un principe qu'on appelle l'universalité budgétaire, qui veut que toutes les dépenses de l'État soient financées par toutes les recettes de l'État. Alors, sans que des recettes fiscales soient dédiées spécifiquement à des dépenses spécifiques. Est-ce que ce n'est pas cela qui explique que des impôts fonciers ne soient pas directement alloués à certains services publics? C'était ça ma première préoccupation. Ma deuxième préoccupation, c'est à tout le panel. J'aimerais savoir, je suis très bref, j'aimerais savoir s'il n'y a pas des études qui donnent, par exemple, un seuil de taux d'impôt foncier sur le montant de l'immeuble qui garantissent une meilleure adhésion de la population. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Je vous remercie.
I'm not sure I'm clear about that question. The rate of property tax that ensures compliance? Is that your question? Can you?
OK.
OK.
La dernière question.
Yes.
Nous sommes en train de parler de la facilité que la population a à payer les impôts fonciers. D'accord? Alors, est-ce qu'il y a des études qui font une corrélation entre le taux de l'impôt foncier avec la meilleure adhésion de la population à l'impôt.
Thank you very much. That is clear. Okay, over to you, Colette. I think the question really, the first question around earmarking in Kenya is for you. So please take that. And then if we have time, any studies that we're aware of on the panel regarding the clear links between the rates and compliance.
Thank you for your question and merci pour votre question également. So on the question of earmarking, it's in the legislation. If I'm correct, it's in the PFM Act. That says that 30% should be spent on development. I'm explaining that knowing that there is a colleague from Kenya actually here who could give more information about this. But what we see from at least the reports available is that even if city county governments put aside that money, some of it, all of it is not used on services. You end up having idle funds, as they were saying, that is just sitting there, not being used because of the lack of planning ahead of time to make sure that they should spend that money on specific project or consulting the population to know exactly what they need. So at the end of the day, you may just have funds sitting in an account waiting to be spent. But our colleague from Kenya, Tiras Njoroge, is around, and I encourage you to keep discussing with him about that. Yeah. On the question about the limitations of Francophone countries to earmark revenues, it's true that it happens, but I guess I was coming from the principle that property tax is linked to services in the sense that, and it's also a tax that taxpayers tend to resist for many reasons. An example is, oh, I built my house, government didn't help me, why are you taxing me? So one way to encourage taxpayers to really comply is to try and show that there is something they are receiving in return. Perhaps this requires really a lot of discussions in the case of Francophone countries between the center and local governments to really understand exactly how best they can make sure that taxpayers can accept that tax. In what ways? Would it be through services? Would it be through transparency, as you said, when it comes to valuation or other means? But I think there is really something that has to be done so that it can facilitate the work of central administrations when it comes to raising that tax, and also the work of local governments in terms of receiving more revenues.
Many thanks, Colette. Thank you so much for that. And I'm afraid that is all that we can take. Just to round up, I think there are key things that have come out. Reciprocity is key at the heart of what we do. Plan for sustainability. So both with regards to donors and governments, think about how these reforms will be sustained. Engagement with taxpayers is critical, and enforcement. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll need 1 more minute of your time, 1 minute, just to say we have tea break now for 20 minutes, so until 11:10. On a la pause café jusqu'à 11h10. Afterwards, we will go, so there will be 2 breakouts. Here in this room, ici dans cette salle, nous aurons à partir de 11h10 la séance 3.2 sur le lien entre taxes et services. So here, session 3.2 on the link between revenues and services. And 3.1, 3.1 will be in the other room, Bioguerra, which is on the right at the bottom. So dans la salle Bioguerra, on aura la session sur le recouvrement forcé. So in this other room, session 3.1 on enforcement. Merci.
OK, on va commencer. Alors, je me suis préparé en anglais. J'avais vu que tout le monde ici parle en anglais, alors je vais essayer de parler en français pour l'introduction. C'est pas bien préparé, on va voir comment ça va, mais j'espère qu'au moins ça peut être un peu intéressant de me voir essayer de parler en français. Cette discussion se met sur une nouvelle discussion sur la possibilité d'utiliser les bases de données et les autres systèmes qui sont créés pour la réforme du taxe foncière pour renforcer les autres fonctions gouvernementales. Et on veut explorer un peu cette possibilité, cette potentiel, et discuter un peu comment est-ce qu'on peut réussir à faire cela et pourquoi c'est important. Comme j'avais dit au commencement du conférence, quand on pense à la taxe foncière, la fiscalité foncière, c'est pas seulement une question de renforcement de recettes. Ça peut aller beaucoup plus loin. Il peut renforcer l'équité du système, mais c'est aussi possible que si on réforme le système de fiscalité foncière, ça peut renforcer aussi autres systèmes de gouvernance, autres systèmes gouvernementaux. Et je pense que ça, c'est un potentiel très, très important, car si on réussit à utiliser la réforme de taxe foncière pour renforcer les autres fonctions gouvernementales, ça aide au gouvernement largement, mais aussi ça renforce la volonté politique pour faire la réforme des systèmes de taxes foncières. Pourquoi c'est possible, cette possibilité que la réforme d'un système de taxes foncières peut renforcer les autres fonctions gouvernementales? Fondamentalement, c'est le fait que si on réussit à cartographier toutes les propriétés, à comprendre où sont toutes ces propriétés, à évaluer la valeur de toutes ces propriétés, ça, c'est une base de données essentielle pour beaucoup de fonctions gouvernementales. Si on veut faire, par exemple, la planification urbaine, ces détails du taxe foncière peuvent aider avec la planification urbaine. Ça peut aider avec les services publics. Ça peut aider avec le titrage des propriétés. Ça peut aussi aider avec la collection des autres recettes au niveau national, par exemple sur celles qui louent les propriétés, sur les riches de la population et tout ça. Alors, il y a cette possibilité parce que la taxe foncière demande une base de données très importante qui peut aider avec beaucoup de fonctions gouvernementales. C'est aussi le cas que pour faire une bonne réforme du taxe foncière, on doit construire des systèmes d'informatique. On doit comprendre comment apporter les factures à chaque maison de la ville. On doit comprendre la construction des systèmes de paiement. Aussi, ces systèmes-là peuvent aider pour la taxe foncière, mais aussi aider pour beaucoup d'autres fonctions gouvernementales. Et alors, on voit que c'est possible que si on fait la réforme du taxe foncière, ça peut aider avec toutes ces autres choses. Et comme ça, la taxe foncière devient encore plus importante comme priorité pour le gouvernement. Mais en pratique, nous savons que ces possibilités ne sont pas fréquemment pris en pratique. Pourquoi? Je pense qu'une raison est que fréquemment, les bases de données qu'on utilise pour la taxe foncière, l'impôt foncier, ne sont pas assez complètes, ne sont pas assez sans erreur pour être utilisées par les autres parties du gouvernement. Alors, si on va à cette coopération, on doit améliorer et renforcer la qualité des bases de données. Deuxièmement, nous avons parlé beaucoup de ce problème de collaboration interinstitutionnelle dans le gouvernement. Si nous n'avons pas des collaborations interinstitutionnelles qui sont fortes, si nous n'avons pas l'habitude de partager les bases de données entre les différentes institutions du gouvernement, alors les possibilités ne peuvent pas arriver. Et finalement, on manque la planification. Pour avoir ces bénéfices autour de tout le gouvernement, on doit planifier au commencement de la réforme pour comprendre comment est-ce qu'on peut utiliser ces bases de données pour les taxes foncières pour renforcer les autres activités du gouvernement. Mais on doit le faire au commencement et fréquemment, cette planification tout ensemble autour du gouvernement n'arrive pas. Alors, on peut demander comment est-ce qu'on peut utiliser plus efficacement les bases de données du taxe foncière, de l'impôt foncier, pour renforcer les autres activités du gouvernement. Et nos panélistes ici vont discuter les différents modèles et différentes possibilités pour utiliser ces bases de données pour renforcer les autres activités du gouvernement. Je peux finir par dire que je pense que cette discussion est importante pour deux raisons. La première raison est claire. Si on peut utiliser les bases de données et les systèmes du taxe foncière pour les autres fonctions du gouvernement, c'est plus efficace. On évite la duplication des efforts. C'est mieux pour le gouvernement, c'est mieux pour la société. Mais c'est aussi cette question de volonté politique. nous avons vu très clairement que fréquemment, l'impôt foncier ne fonctionne pas effectivement parce qu'il y a un manque de volonté politique, il y a un manque de collaboration interinstitutionnelle avec les autres agences du gouvernement. Mais si nous, experts de taxes foncières, d'impôts fonciers, peuvent expliquer au gouvernement, mais si on fait cette réforme de l'impôt foncier, ça peut bénéficier aussi à toutes ces autres agences du gouvernement. Alors, ces autres agences du gouvernement ne sont pas opposées à la réforme, ils sont alliés à la réforme. Alors, c'est une stratégie aussi pour renforcer la volonté politique pour la réforme de fiscalité foncière. Comme ça, je vais finir et je vais passer la parole à nos panélistes. Pour faire les introductions, je vais changer en anglais, car je l'avais écrit en anglais et je vais le faire précisément. Okay, so now in English. Do you hear me do you hear me on the French side? Do we hear the French? Okay, great. So we have 3 speakers. I'll introduce each of them in turn. Our first speaker is Graham Stewart Wilson. Graham is a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto, and he's a doctoral fellow with the LoGRI program. But before and during his PhD work, he's also been actively involved in directly supporting reform programs in a number of countries, and particularly in Sierra Leone and Ethiopia, programs that you've heard about over the course of these 2 days. For his PhD project, he spent the past 5 years studying how to leverage property tax reform and the data that it produces to strengthen the quality of government and governance more broadly. That makes his work the perfect place to start for thinking about this topic. And then after him, we'll begin to look at some specific case studies. So let me pass the floor to Graham.
Okay, thank you, Will, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. Slowly, okay. So my comments today are going to give a relatively broad overview of the topic, which is how we think property tax data can potentially be used to strengthen other areas of public administration. I'll start by outlining what property tax data typically is, and what some of the potential benefits are. And then I'll turn to some of the common barriers that governments face in putting that property tax data to wider use in practice. And finally close with a couple practical strategies to potentially help overcome some of those barriers. We can go to the next slide. I don't have the clicker here. Okay, so effectively taxing property requires creating and maintaining comprehensive, often digital and GIS-supported databases of property information. That process usually starts with identifying all the buildings and land parcels in a jurisdiction by mapping and georeferencing them in GIS software. Next, governments record the key characteristics of each building and parcel, its size, use, quality, and the surrounding services and infrastructure. Basically, all the information that's needed for assessing the value of those properties. Over time, most jurisdictions also aim to document ownership and occupancy, who owns or rents each property. In many cases, this might not strictly be needed to levy a property tax, as we've discussed in some earlier sessions, but it becomes very valuable information when we start talking about how the data can be used for other administrative purposes. The end result of this process is a rich spatial database, one of the most detailed sources of information that many governments have on the spatial layout and characteristics of their cities. That's built primarily for taxation, but that also has clear potential to serve many other functions. We can go to the next slide. So what is it that this data can actually be used for beyond local taxation? I'll highlight 3 specific possibilities and then some broader potential benefits. So first, land administration. This is something that we've discussed in the plenary and breakout sessions yesterday afternoon. The same data that's used for taxing property can help update national land cadastres, reveal unrecorded subdivisions or land transfers, and even help resolve land disputes potentially. Second, national revenue mobilization. We'll discuss this more in one of the breakout sessions following this plenary, but property tax data can strengthen the administration of other taxes, capital gains, land transfer duties, and so on. And if we know whether buildings are rented or owner occupied, that can also support rental income tax enforcement. And because we're assessing property values, that data can also help us to identify high value properties and indirectly through that, high net worth individuals to support personal or corporate income tax enforcement as well. Third is territorial and urban planning. So we'll also discuss this in more detail in one of the following breakout sessions. But detailed spatial data can help to identify service coverage gaps, to guide infrastructure investments, and also to support comprehensive street addressing systems that can benefit many sectors. Beyond these specific tasks, the process of building and sharing property tax data can strengthen public administration more broadly. So it can encourage collaboration. When local governments share useful data with other agencies, those other agencies might become more willing to reciprocate. It can also help expand civil servants' professional networks, helping informal cooperation to happen more easily. And it can also generate cost efficiencies by reducing duplication in mapping and data collection. We can go to the next slide. Despite all this potential, we don't always see property data being used strategically. And there are several types of barriers that get in the way. So the first are technical. Often data sets can't be easily linked because agencies use different property identifiers. So one might track by taxpayer number, another might track by GPS coordinates, and another might track by land parcel code. And without a common identifier, matching is hard and might have to be done manually. Information systems might also be incompatible or not interoperable, and data exports and imports can then become quite complex and require a lot of technical skills, while relying on manual processes then introduces the risk of errors. And finally, many agencies still lack strong GIS and data analysis capacities, which can limit their ability to actually use the property tax data for things, especially like planning and service delivery. We'll go to the next slide. So the second set of barriers are institutional. Many agencies operate in administrative silos, focused on narrow mandates rather than the broader benefits of coordinated mapping or data sharing. Performance incentives also tend to reinforce this. So staff are rewarded for meeting relatively narrow sector-specific targets and not necessarily for collaboration. Formal collaboration mechanisms can be weak in that agencies might not have an explicit mandate to actually share data that they have collected. And even when they do have that mandate, making sure that the data sharing actually happens in practice can still be difficult and even politicized, as we've heard in some of our other sessions previously. In practice, a lot of collaboration happens informally through personal networks or ad hoc relationships, rather than through institutionalized systems. And then finally, relationships between central and local governments can sometimes be top-down in the sense that local governments might be perceived mainly as lower capacity extensions of the state, so that central agencies can doubt the value of data that's coming from below up. Go to the next one. Thank you. The third category of barriers relates to incentives. So specifically here, I'm talking about who bears the costs of collecting property data. Data collection always involves trade-offs between how comprehensive the data is and how costly it is to collect that data. And local governments may only need relatively limited information for property taxation, but national agencies could benefit from a lot more. For example, data on who owns each property, whether those properties are rented out or what businesses are located in those properties. Collecting that information can be quite time-consuming, costly, and sometimes politically sensitive. So residents, for example, might be reluctant to disclose rental information. So without clear incentives or cost-sharing agreements, local governments might have little reason to go beyond collecting the information that's strictly required for taxation. Okay, so how might we think about overcoming these barriers? I'll highlight two related, mutually reinforcing strategies. The first is coordinated GIS mapping. So much of the value of property tax data for other administrative purposes lies in its spatial nature. The fact that collecting property taxes requires identifying and mapping all properties in the jurisdiction. So collaborative GIS mapping is a logical place to start if we want to enhance the broader benefits of property tax data. So the goal ultimately is for all relevant agencies to work from a shared, up-to-date GIS base map. And to create that, it means starting from recent aerial imagery, mapping all buildings and plots, assigning them a unique ID. Existing tax and cadastre records can then be linked to that map to the extent possible, with field verification to fill any gaps. And once the core data that's needed for taxation is in place, limited extra information like occupancy or business use can be added where the benefits justify the costs. The end result is a comprehensive GIS map that outlines what exists on the ground to support first property taxation, but second, a wider range of other government functions. The second strategy is to focus on strengthening interinstitutional collaboration. So as discussed, especially in the first plenary yesterday, collaboration becomes routine when the benefits outweigh the costs. And we can lower those costs through clear institutional arrangements. First, clearly define agency roles and responsibilities in law or formal agreements. Second, establish data sharing protocols that specify what each agency collects, how it's used, and by whom. Third, create incentives and co-financing agreements that reward collaboration. That could include joint performance targets that recognize successful data sharing. And fourth, maintain regular coordination platforms. So working groups, periodic meetings, or even shared office space to help build trust and make collaboration easier. When agencies see tangible gains, stronger revenue collection, more accurate data, less duplication, collaboration can start to sustain itself. So to wrap up, property tax data is not just about raising local revenue. When it's collected and shared effectively, it can become a cornerstone for better land administration, stronger national tax systems, and more informed urban planning. But realizing that potential depends on tackling the practical barriers, technical, administrative, and incentive related, that prevent data from flowing smoothly across government. So thank you all very much. I'll leave my comments there and I'll hand over to my colleagues who will discuss their more specific country experiences.
Okay, thank you very much, Graham. Without any pause, let me pass directly to our next speaker, which is Mr. Kwesi Aka. So Kwesi leads and in fact was the founder of the rental tax unit of the Ghana Revenue Authority. He led the introduction of a rent tax application, which was a GIS software to address the challenges in the administration of the rental tax in Ghana. Well, he's been a champion across government of improved use of geospatial data to strengthen tax administration, including property taxes. So he's an excellent example of the potential of trying to link spatial data across government functions and using them as a foundation for strengthening the effectiveness of property tax administration. Speaking to that success, with the introduction of the GIS-based solution to rental tax revenue in Ghana increased from about 45 million Ghana cedis to about 300 million Ghana cedis annually, attesting to the potential of this kind of work. So let me pass the floor to Kwesi.
Thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon. So as he indicated, it's just to show how we've been able to leverage on property tax data. In Ghana, the property tax data is owned by the Ministry of Local Government, and it was developed by the GIZ group for them, free of charge. It's still the property, the software is still the property of Ghana, and we choose who to use it or who not to use it. And GRA found it by accident. We went into a collaboration to work with the district assemblies. The tax agencies officers wanted to work with the district assemblies. And it is in the course of it that we found that, oh, they had a software that actually had all property data. And at that point, you know what we did? We stopped the collaboration that we wanted to do with them. Don't blame us. And we decided to now look for our interests. And we said, oh, this property data can be used for rent tax and other tax types that we are struggling with. So why don't we now digress positively towards that angle? And so I'm going to show you how we did it. Basically, we were using a paper-based system for these things. And of course, it has all the ills of paper-based system, which is generic. So what you see here is not different. Difficulty in identifying the location of properties, rented properties visited. The last word is very important. So we send officers to the field to visit properties. They come out and say, oh, we found this property, and they have some paper description they've written. But if you take the paper and tomorrow you want to locate that property, it's almost impossible. Then use of paper-based system leading to frequent loss of data. You know how it is handling, fraught with documentation and inadequate information on rent tax payers. And then the last one, no real-time monitoring. It was very difficult to monitor. So I've been an office manager before, and you send about 20 people to the field, go to this area and comb the area, find out what is at stake, revenue items there. They come in the evening and say, oh, we found only 2. What is the proof? How do you validate that 2? Were they there or they went to their homes? It's so difficult. But with this, whilst they are on the field, you see them in real time, and you can even visit exactly their geolocation without telling them anything, and they will see you there. And that's the advantage with using GIS software. Okay, now that problem we had, paper-based, showed in the figures. You know, revenue agencies, we deal with figures. That's all we work for, revenue. So it showed in the figures. Just be mindful of the collection area and the target area. I'm sure we all understand targeting. Every month, every year, the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Economics, whatever, gives us a revenue that we should bring to finance the budget. And so that's a target area for rent tax from 2015. And 2015 specifically because that was when the law changed and the new rate was promulgated. So we are measuring from that side. If you look at it, every year up to 2021, they were never able to achieve the target. There were negative deviations. So look at the collection side, 100 and something, 42 million, up to 42 million against 86. So even as the target reduces, we still are not able to achieve it because the system was very weak. Now we move to what happened. So we found the software in 2021, and apparently it had been in existence since 2013. And we started using it. It's an end-to-end web-based GIS solution, and we connect actually to the DRF software. That's the name of the software. It belongs to the Ministry of Local Government, as I've said, and aims at improving revenue mobilization, reduce leakages, and enhance the overall efficiency of the revenue management. We have actually implemented it in all the 59 tax offices across Ghana. And we did it in 2 phases. The first phase was April to September 2021 and April to May 2022 for the second phase. Now, when we did that, from 2021, the revenue was 42. Now see the figures that came up. 2022, the figure jumped for the first time to 193 revenue collection, and that's million. And then 2022, 23, 300 and something, 2024, 300 and something, and 2025 hasn't ended. We have already, this is as at the end of September. So I haven't even added October figures to it. So we are sure we'll cross 400 this year. And that is the beauty of using that software. What are the benefits of it? The geolocation, I think I've said some of them in person. The geolocation of tax items. You know, in every tax, why do we do registration? Because in taxation, if you don't know the one who is going to pay, you just not started anything. The same way, there's an other aspect target of people. I don't call it people, but things that pay tax or we generate tax from, they are not human beings. They are properties, items. And if you don't know where those tax items are, you're virtually up to nothing. So that is very important. Then motivation, officers see what they are doing. They can monitor it on their tablets and see that, oh, we are progressing. So we can be, performance appraiser. We can be appraised very well. Ability to easily track progress. We're able to track progress. And then easy access to data for analysis, because the data is always there. It's not now that you're going to collect, and it's rare time they do it on the field. And then use of electronic applications. So they pay online. GRA, you don't pay cash. Everything is cashless, so everything is online. And we've removed completely paper from renters and other administrative parts of the GRA work. Now, so I'm going to straight away, I actually wanted to do a live presentation, but it looks like technical challenges. So I've done some screenshots just to help. So there's a landing page, and this is just to prove that we are actually, move on to the next slide. Yes, there's a landing page. So I told you that it's a software that we may say we are parasiting. So, but the proper word is collaborating, isn't it? We are collaborating with the local authority because this was originally developed for them. And you could see rent tax down there, the lower left corner. And then OASL, that is 2 lands for ground rent. They're also using the software. And then LUSPA, that was town and country planning. They are developing something for them too on it. And as a matter of fact, because of the nature of it, you can develop multiple applications on it on the same base. Then we use virtually vector maps. So we don't use raster. Raster is difficult to manage, but vectors are easy to handle. But even vectors, we have LUSPA that has developed parcels. And then we have places that they haven't got funding to develop the parcels. We use open source building footprints. But what we've also done is that we've trained some gentlemen in the office, very young guys, on GIS and how to use it to develop building footprints. And they can do as many as, I think the minimum is 500 a day per person. And they can do as many as 1,000 when we don't disturb their peace. Which I am guilty of. I disturb them a lot. So that's part of the problem. Okay. So they look through the system using QGIS and then S3, Bing, Google Maps, and then zoom into areas to see anything that is developing. Additionally, if somebody is on the field and finds a property, it's in a location, but can't find a property there. It's in a location where there's a property, but can't find it on the system. He takes the geolocation, send it to them, and they can easily zoom in and know that, okay, this is it, and then develop, digitize building footprints for load next time. So this is zooming in a bit for you to see how it is. Then this is example of where they use parcels. So this has been developed by the national body called Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority, but they don't have funding, so they haven't covered even 5% of the country. So the few that they have, we use them anyway. So there's a lot of interagency collaboration in this. And when you zoom in that one, you see the, so now let me explain the color coding that you are seeing. Depending upon which organization is using it, the color coding is different. GRA, we are using this yellow and what we actually call blue-black, but it's actually, it looks like black. And then it shows, he was saying either owner-occupied or tenant-occupied. So yellow is tenant-occupied and blue-black is owner-occupied. And you can develop forms depending upon how you want it and what data you want to collect. You can, and this example of the forms. And then you have reports. So you look at the other blues, the next one, I'm moving a bit fast. Those in blue, they are reports, and you can develop multiple reports, analysis, and anything that you want. And this is an example of it. So on daily basis, as they are working, I can open to daily activity and I'll see the latest entry that was done. And for tax purposes, we are not supposed to reveal things. So this is name and telephone number. So the one I'm showing is name and the telephone number, but the 00, you can call it. All right. Okay, so that is it. So basically, there are a lot of functionalities, but for want of time, this is a few we can show. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Kwesi. That's terrific. I'll move on again quickly to our next speaker. So our last speaker, we say last but not least, or last but greatest, we'll go further, is Flavia Zabali Musisi. She's the supervisor of the GIS unit within the Directorate of Physical Planning in Kampala City Council, or Capital City Authority in Uganda, where she has led efforts to leverage location analytics to enhance property rates collection for local governments, while linking spatial data to efforts to strengthen the overall effectiveness of government activities in Kampala. Flavia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, Wilson. Good afternoon, our esteemed participants. Bonjour. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and thanks to LoGRI for the opportunity to share the Kampala story with you at this conference. Let me take a brief moment to introduce our Director for Revenue Collection, Mr. Robert Noere. Thank you. And our Manager for Research and Business Analysis in Director of Revenue Collection, Mr. Clifford Diego. I'm introducing them because they are responsible for key statistics that I'm going to be presenting in this presentation. As the GIS team, we just support them. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to talk to you about how our Kampala Capital City Authority is using our frontiers like our data integration, our mapping knowledge into action to support our revenue enhancement, but in the end, support our city administration. So Kampala Capital City Authority is the body that runs Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, on behalf of the central government. So we came into play in 2011 after the government, after management inconsistencies by Kampala City Council before 2011. We have a total of 5 divisions. This is the map of Kampala. It shows the 5 divisions. And then we have 99 parishes, 851 villages, with a total area of 195 square kilometers, of which 17.1 is lake area. That's where we have a part of Lake Victoria. And then we have 12.2, which is wetlands. So that is undevelopable land. Then we have a population of 1.8 million residents. These are residents. And over 4 million depopulation. Now, this is the challenge. How is it a challenge? We have to deliver services to these people. Next slide, please. So when we look at this slide, all those boxes show some of the services that we give to the people, just some of the services, a lot of services, from our roads, drainage, waste collection, health services, education services, land use, land management, gender services, supporting local people to improve livelihoods. All these are services. But all these services require costs. There's a cost to them. So if we don't have the money, we cannot deliver the services. So it was important for us to make sure that we get the money. And then we looked at property rates. And when you look at the pie chart, the lower pie chart, it shows us the different own source revenue sources that we have. But of course, when you look at the bigger one, 45% is property rates. So it was really important for us to maximize collection of property rates to be able to deliver the services to the citizenry. But we had outdated and manual property rolls. I remember at a point, I joined KCCA in 2012 as a small GIS officer. The revenue teams could bring demand notes, thousands of demand notes, and then you look at areas, 200 million, 150, 60, 80, 5 million. But out of like 10 demand notes, we could only identify like 2 taxpayers. Now you're looking at all this money, you're seeing it, but you cannot touch it because you don't know where these people are. This was our problem. So we needed to improve how to get to these people. So we needed to improve our tax data. And to improve the tax data, we need to make sure that the tax data is accurate. So we have accurate collection, we have regular updates, and we have integration into digital platforms. This was a must. So in order for us to do this, we did the city address model and the computer-aided mass valuation. The city address model and computer-aided mass valuation was supposed to have 3 main objectives. 1, to update and implement a GIS-based property valuation management system, property valuation management with GIS, a connection, so that we don't keep looking for where these properties are. That will be sorted. Then, of course, to improve efficiency, effectiveness in property identification and revenue management. Of course, if you improve identification, then management becomes easier. And then attach addresses to all properties. So there are a lot of benefits in this, like 1 or 2 things. So I'm going to talk about the city address model. What is it? The city address model and the computer-aided mass valuation were done under the Kampala Institutional and Infrastructure Development Program, which was a World Bank funded project. So World Bank funded projects usually have infrastructure, so they are developing infrastructure, but they have the institutional component, which is aimed at making sure that while we are developing this infrastructure, government can be able to get revenue that can maintain this infrastructure after the project. So in this, we did the city address model and the computer-aided mass valuation to see how we can maximize collection of property rates to maintain the infrastructure, but also deliver services to Kampala citizens. So here we standardize addresses for navigation, property identification, and service delivery. And then, of course, we have the laws that were guiding us. The Kampala Capital City Act gives Kampala City the mandate to name roads, number buildings, install signage, and cause property owners to install house number plates. But that's just a paragraph. So there's only a paragraph. How you name the roads, how you number the buildings wasn't there. So we came up with the road naming guidelines, house numbering guidelines that guided us to make sure that we did numbering of over 300,000 properties, naming of over 7,000 roads, installing signages, and then, of course, using GIS technology. And while we are using all these in tandem, we were able to come up with the city address model, which was used to link into the computer-aided mass valuation. Now, for the computer-aided mass valuation, we still supported the team, the data collection team. It was an in-house project. We never procured a provider to come and do everything. So we did it internally, physical planning, manning the city address model, and direction of revenue collection, manning the computer-aided mass valuation. But GIS was supporting with the data collection. So we used survey 1, 2, 3, form-centric data collection, digital. We send teams to the field, you can monitor. There were over 200 people in the field, data collectors. So if you send them and you don't have digital forms, then you're actually wasting government money, because they'll go and they'll play the whole time and they won't produce results, and yet it's a project that has a start and end. So that's how we manage them. And then when we talk about computer-aided mass valuation first, we are guided by the Local Government Rating Act of 2005, which gives us the mandate to do valuation, but also to collect property rates. So we used our data of buildings, of our size, building data, the size, the type, the number of stories, its land use, our roof material, floor material, window material. People that are in these taxes know what we collect. So all this information was put into the form, but together with other information, because we knew that this chance to collect this data doesn't happen all the time. So for all these other directorates that need data about buildings, we found out what is it that they wanted. So we had over 80 attribute fields to collect, which later dropped because of targets. But yes, we did collect the data. And then after this collection was done, we had 3D oblique images that supported the validation of this data. And then in the end, they were put into the mass appraisal via data models to support the fair assessment. Next slide, please. Okay, that one. So now we got into the integration. Now, where we are integrating the city address model information with the valuation information to create a comprehensive database that can lead us to anything about a particular building. And we also included other layers like roads, utility line, the satellite imagery, cadastre, and then the zoning, which is like the Kampala Physical Development Plan, the master plan for Kampala, to be able to also understand where these buildings are and what's the proposed land uses and what's the land use that is currently there. So all that information we got from there. Then, of course, CAM provided the attribute information for geocoding. And then the two are synchronized to improve how we track revenue collection in real time. Next slide, please. And after this integration, we saw magic. 1 minute. Sorry. So we saw the magic, and from here, we can see that before we started the status model in financial year 2016-2017, we're collecting around 17.53 Uganda billion shillings. That's like around $5 million. But as of last financial year, we are collecting 64.79. That's around, I think, $20 million. And the other beautiful thing is when it comes to targets and actual collection, last financial year, the revenue team there targeted to collect 60 billion shillings, and they collected 64 billion shillings. Why? Because we know where we are collecting from. So these are also the other benefits apart from getting the monies. When you get the monies, what next? These are some of the other benefits. Improve service delivery through funding roads, drainage, health institutions, and what. Then property tax is attached to 3D oblique image. The image here is actually an aerial image. You just have to keep turning. And we use this to validate data by the data collectors from the field to make sure that whatever they are saying is actual. Is the actual. Sometimes we go to the field, they say the building is 4 stories when it's actually 6. So this helped us to validate. Then it helps us improve our emergency services, the navigation bit, improve emergency services, but also door-to-door deliveries, better planning. We know where the formal areas are, we know where the informal areas are. So this helps us tailor the limited resources to the areas that need them most. Then it helps us in infrastructure development, road upgrades. We determine which road should be upgraded first using this data. Identification of project affected people for the road upgrades by how much they're affected. I know if you put like the road design, planned road design onto the 3D oblique image, you can be able to see how much of a person's property is affected, and then the values can even be generated, even if you didn't go to the field, because this is very visible. Then, of course, supporting other city services, fiscal planning services, issuance of building permission, issuance of development permission. All this we use this data. Now, these are some of the success factors. We can talk about them later. And let me conclude. In conclusion, please. By leveraging property data, by the way, Kampala is enhancing fiscal sustainability, improving service delivery, and building more equitable, resilient urban systems. Comprehensive registers are force multipliers for administration, fueling planning and revenue mobilization. Data is our new gold. We need to invest in data and technology for better administration. Data builds cities, stronger taxes for stronger states. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Great. Thank you so much, Flavia. Thank you to all our speakers. As usual, I'm going to ask a few questions of our panelists, and then we'll open the floor to questions. I'll go in order. So I'll start with you, Graham. You've talked about the potential of sharing data from property tax reform for other government functions to strengthen government more broadly. And we've heard nice examples from Ghana and Uganda of how that can happen in practice. However, we know that in most countries, most of the time, this kind of collaboration doesn't actually happen. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit from your research about when is success likely to happen? What is necessary for success in this kind of collaboration to happen? And also, when are governments likely to encounter challenges in trying to make this kind of potential into a reality?
Okay, thank you, Will, for the question. I think to answer this, I'm actually going to draw on another example or case from Uganda. So specifically related to how KCCA has shared property tax data with the Uganda, with URA, with the National Tax Authority, for a similar goal as what was done in Ghana to help improve rental income tax enforcement. So the actual process of what happened was relatively straightforward. Basically, KCCA shared all of its property tax register with the Uganda Revenue Authority, and that was used to identify landlords who were not included in the URA's database. That was facilitated by the fact that in KCCA's data, they already know whether properties are rented or owner occupied, because only rented properties are subject to property rates in Uganda. So that information was already included. But the process was also not straightforward. So the two data sets didn't have any common property identifier. So the only way to actually match the two was through the names of owners. So through this matching process, URA was only able to match about 40% of KCCA's records with its own tax register, which nevertheless was a huge improvement over what they were doing previously, which was basically door-to-door surveys to identify property taxpayers. But I think what's really interesting about this case is also why it happened when it did, because that throws light on the specifics of that question, which is when is data sharing likely to happen and when is it less likely to happen? And this initiative basically took place at a time when there was major reform momentum happening. So KCCA was in the process of, it had been established some few years earlier and was in the process of sort of major reform investments in new digital systems and in data collection. And URA was also in the process of modernizing its tax administration. So there was kind of this window of opportunity where there was both. Okay, I'll speak slower. There was this window of opportunity when there was both reforms happening. So there was enthusiasm for finding new ways of doing things, pushing for, the old ways of doing things were changing. And there was also high-level political support for the reforms happening at KCCA and for this kind of interagency collaboration. So that's sort of what enabled this data sharing and this matching and collaboration to happen. But of course, those windows of opportunity don't last forever, which sort of points towards the importance of really taking advantage of them when they do arise to institutionalize this type of collaboration and solidify it for the long term. And that has happened actually in this case, because KCCA continues to share its property tax data with the URA for the purpose of identifying rental income taxpayers. But there are also limitations because the relationship is not two-way. So URA doesn't in return share its own tax information with KCCA, which could in theory be very useful for KCCA, especially to identify the beneficial owners of certain types of properties. So I think this case shows both sides of the equation. There's this potential when momentum happens to capitalize on these collaborative opportunities, but also sustaining it in the long term and making it reciprocal, especially, is a longer term challenge.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Graham. And thanks also for being brief, which will keep us some time for the rest of the room. Let me go directly now to Kwesi. So Kwesi, you've described a nice success story. You took data from the property tax system, you linked it to the national level, you connected it with rental income tax data, and you improved revenue collection as a result. Now that you've achieved one success, of course, we want to know what's your next success going to be? And so the question I want to ask is, what are you thinking now at the GRA level about how else you could use the data that you've collected to continue to strengthen your operations at the level of the GRA?
Thank you very much for the question. That has already been done. It's underway. But I would say that, as has been said many times, the political will and sometimes leadership interests and different variations here and there affects the pace of the success or achieving whatever you call a success. So it's been identified in GRA already, and we have reserved a domain name. Actually, we bought a domain name, reserved it, which is called GRA Jour Apps. So we've identified that out of this data, we can also develop applications. We've done presentations to all these bodies in the authority. High net worth unit are interested in waiting. Registration unit, because they said, wow, so this is the properties on land, and registration is about location of where people are. And we register people and we don't know where they are. We sometimes even do audit, we can't trace where we have to send assessment. So if we get this, so about 5 different applications have already been identified to be developed from this. What happened, I mean, what we would have achieved it by now, but stamp duty and others, if I could mention them. What has slowed the pace was change of leadership. And you know that when it comes to GIS softwares, it's not very popular. So depending upon the leadership you're talking to, you may not get the kind of reception and support that you need. The leader in GRA that heard it for just 2 minutes, saw it, and gave it all support for us to get to this point, left. The one that came, despite all the convincing data we had, didn't see, I don't know, whatever was the problem. But the next one that came, only last week, announced to the whole GRA that he has met me and he has seen the kind of data we have and how awesome they are and how we are doing taxation on database and using data to do revenue mobilization. And so he's going to give us all the support. I'm waiting to get to Ghana to see all the support. So that is actually how it is. But as for the benefits and spreading it to other areas of GRA tax administration, it has already been established, it has been identified, and we're just waiting for the support to get there. Thank you.
Terrific. And in the background of everything we talk about here is this question of political will, political commitment. Flavia, a very similar question for you. You've talked about the integration of different databases and data sources across the Kampala City Council. I wonder if you could do 2 things for me. First is, tell us a bit about the process. What were the challenges? What were the points of resistance? And what allowed you to be successful? And then second, now that you've done that, do you have any plans about you can further use this data to continue to strengthen the way in which that data is used to strengthen government functions? Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll begin with the process. City address model, computer-aided mass valuation. We call it a marriage as a team. So we said this is a marriage because one fact is from our Director of Fiscal Planning and the revenue bit is from Director of Revenue Collection. So we got the working teams, project teams, and we said, okay, this is a marriage. And sometimes we used to fight, and then you're like, okay, yes, people fight in marriages, but we have to make this marriage work. And yes, we did make it work. So like I said, addressing required geocoordinates and address information, and revenue brought in all the valuation information attributes, and we synchronized them to create a single database, which was later used to create the CAM-CAMV system. Of course, it has its challenges. The system has challenges, but I think we are in process of upgrading it to make it a perfect system. But the data is perfect and the data is there, and that's the most important thing. We have the data. Now, along the way, I think some of the factors why we were able to win was one, the policy, the fact that we had policy that was supporting us, even with resistance. We just had to find ways of managing the resistance because the policy gives us the mandate. Then the funding, the fact that the World Bank funded this project, valuation is expensive, and from all the sessions in this conference, it has been mentioned, it's expensive. But because we got that funding, we were able to deliver and get the output. Then, of course, management support, even political support. The political wing at first fought us like nothing, but we had to engage person to person inside the politicians, get champions that spoke for us until we got to a point where the politicians in community meetings stand up to talk about taxation as a good thing for the community. So I think those were some of the wins, but we also had challenges. Of course, we had data, incomplete data and data gaps. Those ones we worked around and made sure we get solutions and we got the data, but we had public resistance. This, we had to just come up with a whole communication campaign where we target how to reach out to these people. I'm a GIS person, I'm a physical planner, I'm not a tax expert. During that time, I became a tax expert. I knew how to talk to people about how you convert this revenue, how you assess, until the last point, but also to convince them to like the tax, because I kept telling them it's way back from hard tax from the 1900s. So it's not a new tax like you're saying. And of course, after all these sensitization engagements, the thing that at the end they would just tell us, okay, we didn't know that it was really important, but okay, we're asking that KCCA waives all our areas and we start on a clean slate. And we took this to management and management accepted this. So this was a beautiful thing. And I think it's one of the reasons why compliance is being realized, even if we still have challenges, but we are still enforcing. Then, of course, the other was collaboration. The Ministry of Lands, for example, was not ready to share data with us during the project until we ended the project, when they saw that it had taken off. People just love a moving bus. But how you get the people into the bus, no one wants to know. But when the bus left, they jumped on. So they gave us all the data and were able to integrate all the lands data onto this other data, all the postal data. Many institutions hadn't want to share, but they later shared. And now we have a comprehensive database. So I think we were able to get around the challenges. But the most important thing, moving forward, we have this data in several systems. We have the GIS, and we are making sure that this data is linked to all the required systems, the physical planning systems, development application, building permit systems, so that people can be able to get this information, the revenue systems, so that at the end of the day, when, for example, in physical planning, a building has been approved and engineering has given it the occupation permit, the revenue system should be able to pick it. The revenue system should be able to pick it and do the valuation, and systems should be able to speak. So systems, we are pushing this. We are pushing that all these systems that we have, land information systems, permit systems, can be able to speak through APIs, application program interfaces. That's what we need. And if we can do that, I think we shall be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. We have about 25 minutes, so let me open the floor to questions. As always, if those in the audience can be relatively brief, we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Please raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question. We'll start here in the middle.
Thank you very much. be brief and slow. I have two questions, one for Mr. Aka and one for Ms. Muzizi. To Mr. Aka, I saw in one of your slides that you had a value for the rental contract of the different polygons that were identified. The last line where you had crossed out the phone numbers. Is this estimated from the property tax value, or do you actually have a way to convince tenants to tell you the rental value? And if it's the second, what is this way? Because no one knows how to do it. To Ms. Muzizi, as Grams mentioned, you cannot yet access data from the URA. I'd be curious to know if this is because of data protection law that blocks taxpayer data to be divulged, if not in court cases, or if it's more to do with the actual political will from the URA. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Other hands. Let's go to the back behind you there.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to ask my Ugandan friend, beautiful data. I've seen how the revenue rose from 17,000 to about 17 million to about 60 million. But the challenge here is it was World Bank supported program, right? I just want to know your valuation cycle and how that you are preparing for the next revaluation exercise, how that will be supported. Thank you.
All right. A great question that I think everyone faces. Camille here in front.
Oui, c'est bon, ça marche. Bonjour, je relaye des commentaires. Bon, ben, puisque vous avez mis l'appareil, je vais parler en français. Je relaye des commentaires en ligne de la Côte d'Ivoire, de Monsieur Bois, deux partages d'expériences très intéressants. Le premier, c'est que la Côte d'Ivoire a réussi à mettre en place assez récemment un identifiant unique des parcelles qui est donc partagé entre toutes les entités gouvernementales. Le deuxième concerne l'utilisation des données du cadastre, donc cadastre fiscal, pour deux usages assez innovants et intéressants. Le premier, c'est que la DGI partage ces données avec le gouvernement dans le cas d'indemnisation du propriétaire. Je parle lentement parce que c'est très technique. Dans le cas où des propriétaires doivent être expropriés parce que des zones ont été déclarées d'utilité publique, par exemple des projets routiers. Donc là, comme ça, on connaît les montants, etc. La deuxième utilisation, c'est que les données sont partagées avec le registre des entreprises, notamment pour pouvoir... alors, en fait, les données du cadastre ont des données sur les activités professionnelles. Et ça, c'est partagé pour le registre des entreprises, notamment pour pouvoir les géolocaliser. Donc, géolocaliser les nouvelles entreprises créées. Donc, il y a vraiment ce partenariat et ce partage qui a pu être créé en Côte d'Ivoire. Merci, Monsieur Bois, pour ce partage qui servira de source d'inspiration, peut-être pour d'autres pays ici présents.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Why don't we pass then to our speakers to respond particularly to the first two questions. We can go in order. We can start with you, Kwesi, and then to Flavia.
Thank you very much. What we do in Ghana actually is that we have laws that should have established the data for rent. Those laws are not very well implemented or enforced. So, and then we have over 13 million properties. By our figures so far, 30%, and also from the last census that was done, 30% of those properties have tenants in them. Now, if we look at that figure, we haven't even covered 5%. So the approach we are using now is this. You should have paid stamp duty on every tenant rent agreement. People don't bring it. You won't even get about 2%. In fact, about 1% brings it. So if you take a agreement and you send the person to court, it will be thrown out. So using a tenancy agreement that hasn't got stamp duty on it, and listening to word of mouth, we take it as the same. So what we do is that if yesterday I didn't have 95% of those rented paying, and today I have the 95% paying, then even if they pay 1 city, is good enough. It helps me to bring them into the tax net first. Then later I will do investigation and find better data as to the actual rent they are paying. So I must be honest with you. It's just word of mouth. We come to you and say, are you renting a place? Okay, how much is it? Whatever you tell us is good, because it is not disputed. It's from your own mouth. You will pay, and we don't have any dispute so far. Everybody just gives it and pays, and that is what we are getting the money from. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the questions. Sometimes I'm a teacher, and I was told if you talk about something and there are no questions, then people either haven't understood or something. So the first one, why URA is not sharing data with us? Of course, we have serious data sharing issues in Uganda, because we really don't have a law when it comes to data sharing. However, there is plans for the national spatial data infrastructure, so that we can now iron out all these data sharing issues, because wherever we get a chance to speak like we are here, we talk about these things, and we make sure that we just don't stop at talking, but we continue pushing the people that are responsible to make sure that they help us speak to where they should speak. And I know that we shall realize that one time. Then the other question about our World Bank project, how are we doing? What are we going to do when it comes to evaluation? It was a project which transitioned into operations. So as part of our operation plan, we do valuation every year. Every year we're doing the valuation. So that's how we are sustaining this whole thing. So all the new buildings are gotten into the role, and yeah, that's how we are moving. Thank you very much.
I think, let me ask, actually, Flavia, a small follow-up. This is on behalf of Sam. So you've told us about how you bring new properties into the system. Do you also have a strategy you use to identify properties that have changed from the old system? So how do you update your data over time, as well as bringing new data into the system?
Fact is, we don't have a special system like AI that identifies new properties, but are using new satellite imagery, and already you have the building footprints of those existing. You just see there's a new building, and then we digitize out the building footprints. So currently that's how we are doing it. But of course the future is brighter, because with AI, things are getting even more interesting, because while we digitized all the over 300,000 buildings by hand. In recent times, artificial intelligence can actually extract. So I know that the future is very bright, especially that the will is there. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. And I think the next time we all meet together for a conference like this, I imagine we might talk a lot about the AI tools that are emerging, what they can do, also what they can't do, what their limitations are. So I think you're putting a finger on a question that's very important for, I'm sure, everyone in the room. Let me see if there are any other questions. We have a couple of minutes left if anyone has a last question or comment. So let's go to Shakara here.
It's actually not a question, just a contribution. In Nigeria, another way to get a rental value is to communicate to the Nigeria Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers. They will give you the updated rental value, and you talk to the firms, then you compare it. And as for updating of properties, over there in Kaduna, we have a 360 camera, a Trimble camera that is mounted on a vehicle, of which is a surveying camera. We run it through the streets periodically, So from the pictures it takes, you find out if there are new structures or they have been demolished, then we use it for valuation as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Really interesting. I don't see any other comments, which I think is fine. That means we need an extra long coffee break, an extra 5 minutes of coffee break as we get to the end of 2 very busy days. So let me just say one word of conclusion. Non, je vais le faire en français, car nous avons parlé trop en anglais, alors je vais finir en français. Je ne veux pas dire beaucoup de sommaire de cette session. Je pense que les panélistes ont expliqué très, très bien la potentiel, les possibilités, ce qu'ils ont fait, mais aussi les défis à réussir à cet effort. Ce que je veux dire pour finir est seulement, si quelqu'un te demande pourquoi est-ce que la fiscalité foncière est tellement importante, je pense que la réponse de cette discussion est c'est pas seulement les recettes, c'est pas seulement l'équité, c'est aussi la possibilité que si on fait une réforme du système de fiscalité foncière très efficace, ça peut bénéficier à beaucoup d'autres fonctions du gouvernement. Et c'est d'une partie comme ça que nous, fiscalistes foncières, peuvent discuter avec les autres parties du gouvernement et dire cela est très, très important, pas seulement pour nous, mais pour nous tous. Je pense qu'on peut le laisser comme ça. J'ai des petites annonces pour la prochaine session. Alors, on va faire une pause de 25 minutes pour le café. C'est un peu plus long. On peut relaxer un peu. Après qu'on retourne, ça va être à 3h10. On va recommencer. 3h10. Le breakout 4.1 sera une bioguerra. OK? Alors, celui-là, c'est sur le taxe foncière et faire la connexion avec les autres taxes nationales. Oui. Breakout 4.2, c'est ici, dans cette chambre-là, pour discuter le lien entre la taxe foncière, la fiscalité foncière et les autres fonctions du gouvernement, comme la planification urbaine et les autres exemples. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a d'autre? Comme toujours, on demande que tu laisses les écouteurs sur la siège. Et je pense que c'est tout. On peut faire le café et on se voit à 3h10 pour recommencer dans les petites sections. Merci beaucoup. OK. Hello everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. On va recommencer. We're going to restart. OK. Comme la dernière fois, je vais commencer en français, et puis pour les introductions, je vais changer en anglais. Alors, tout le monde peut être prêt avec les écouteurs. Everyone can be ready with the headphones. Alors, je suis content de voir qu'il y a encore beaucoup d'énergie dans la chambre. On discute, on veut parler. Il y a beaucoup d'idées qui circulent dans la chambre. Et je pense que c'est vraiment excellent. Si on arrive à la fin d'une conférence tellement intense, tout le monde a encore d'énergie, va encore discuter. J'espère que ça veut dire que ça a été une bonne discussion, une bonne expérience ensemble. Maintenant, on va fermer la conférence. Mais on va sentir un peu de réflexion du groupe. La dernière fois que nous avons fait une grande conférence sur la fiscalité foncière, c'était 2 années passées à Nairobi. Quelqu'un de vous était là-bas avec nous. À la fin de la conférence, c'était à moi de faire un grand sommaire de la conférence pour 15 minutes. J'ai une bonne nouvelle. Je ne le fais pas cette fois-là. Parce que je pense que cette fois-là, ce n'est pas nécessaire. Parce que nous avons discuté ensemble pour 2 journées et c'est bien clair que maintenant, ce n'est pas une conférence où il y a LoGRI, il y a moi qui partage à vous les leçons, les expériences, ce qu'il doit faire. Nous sommes ensemble dans un groupe de personnes qui sont tous grands experts sur ces questions, qui ont des grandes expériences, des expériences que je ne connaissais pas avant de cette conférence. Alors ça, c'est vraiment une chose géniale. Nous avons presque 100 personnes tous les experts du continent sur ce sujet de fiscalité foncière et nous avons discuté ensemble. Je ne pensais pas à moi de te dire ce qui était important. Je pensais déjà clair ce qui était important. Et oui, LoGRI a partagé les expériences, mais surtout, nous avons senti les expériences, les leçons de vous, de tout le monde ici avec nous. Alors, je ne fais pas de sommaire. Au lieu de faire un grand sommaire de ce que nous avons fait, on va partager l'opportunité à toute la Chambre de partager des petites réflexions sur la conférence. Alors, on va commencer avec les 6 personnes que tu veux voir là-bas. On a demandé à ces 6 personnes de partager pour maximum 3 minutes, une petite réflexion, une idée, quelque chose qui t'a frappé, quelque chose que tu penses pour le futur, les choses qu'on peut faire ensemble, les choses que nous devrons encore comprendre. Après de faire ces 6 personnes-là, on va ouvrir la chambre à tout le monde. Alors, si tu as quelque chose que tu veux contribuer, une petite réflexion, une idée vraiment clé, tu veux partager, on peut le faire, mais encore très brièvement, 1 minute, 2 minutes, seulement pour sentir, j'espère, un peu l'énergie du chambre et pour partager entre nous la responsabilité pour faire la sommaire du conférence. Et après, quand nous avons fini, probablement une demi-heure plus ou moins, je vais passer à Titi Lola qui va faire les remerciements à tout le monde et on va fermer. Moi, je vais quand même commencer avec une réflexion avant de passer à Sam, qui sera la prochaine. Et c'est seulement pour dire que pour moi, ça me semble que ça, c'est le moment pour travailler sur la fiscalité foncière. Car il y a beaucoup d'énergie dans cette chambre, mais aussi, nous avons fait une conférence 2 années passées. Nous avons fait une nouvelle conférence aujourd'hui. Et dans 2 années, beaucoup de choses ont changé. On a vu des grands progrès dans beaucoup de pays à renforcer ces systèmes. Et je pense que le potentiel pour continuer de faire est vraiment énorme. Et en fait, et ça c'est vrai ce que je te dis maintenant, 20 minutes passées, j'avais reçu un message de Sri Lanka, en Asie, pour demander si on peut travailler ensemble pour renforcer le système de fiscalité foncière en Sri Lanka. Alors, ce n'est pas seulement en Afrique, c'est dans tout le monde que le moment est vraiment là pour travailler sur ces questions. Et je pense que c'est vraiment un bel moment d'être tout ensemble. Alors, avec ça, je vais commencer à passer le microphone à tout le monde qui sont là-bas dans la chambre. On commence avec Sam Agay. Sam est un économiste, mais plus important, il est directeur des études Graduate Studies. Oh, regardez, je vais changer en anglais. Je m'excuse. Okay, now in English. Sam Agay, oh my God. He's a development economist. He's the Dean of Graduate Studies at the African School of Economics. And he's been the dean since 2018. As you heard at the beginning, the African School of Economics is one of the premier educational institutions in all of Africa. They've also been our key partner in the delivery of this conference. So we're extremely grateful to Sam for his partnership and the partnership of ASC in delivering this conference. We also know that he's a good person to start because Sam is not specifically a property tax expert. He's a development expert, and so he can tell us what he thinks about some of the discussions that we've had so far. So let me begin by getting a microphone to Sam. Do we have a microphone? Okay, thank you, Sam. Over to you.
Merci pour l'honneur. Donc moi, je ne suis pas vraiment un spécialiste d'impôts, mais j'ai fait une analyse un peu naïve de ma fonction de macroéconomiste que je vais partager avec vous. Donc, je me suis dit, si cette conférence est une réussite, nous admettons tous que c'est une réussite. Donc, la conférence est basée sur quelques facteurs clés. Donc, les mêmes facteurs clés qui ont servi à la réussite de cette conférence doivent donc être étendus pour la réussite du système fiscal foncier. Donc, quels sont les facteurs que nous avons ou bien que j'ai identifiés comme facteurs clés de succès de cette conférence? Le premier facteur a été l'innovation et la technologie. Donc, nous l'avons répété tout au long de la conférence que pour l'impôt foncier aussi, la technologie va être très utile et plus important, ça va être aussi transférable à d'autres domaines d'activité. Par exemple, les systèmes satellites de LoGRI peuvent être utilisés en agriculture, en archéologie, ou encore le système de digitalisation de l'impôt rwandais peuvent être utilisés pour d'autres services publics. Le deuxième facteur que j'ai identifié est le capital humain. Donc, c'est très important d'avoir un bon capital humain, que ce soit par la formation, que ce soit par la location de la main-d'œuvre compétente ou que ce soit par même l'embauche. Donc, vous avez vu qu'il y a des experts de LoGRI, il y a des experts de la SE ici qui participent à cela. Et il y a la DGI aussi, qui a beaucoup d'experts ici, qui permettent que ce système fonctionne. Le dernier facteur qui semble le plus évident, le plus facile, le plus simple, mais le plus important pour moi est la collaboration. Donc, j'ai mis le doigt sur la collaboration entre différentes institutions qui portent donc le succès de cette conférence-là. Donc, il faut souligner que la DGI, par exemple, avec tout son pouvoir étatique, s'offre au jeu et permet que, voilà, on fasse des expériences avec le système fiscal foncier béninois et qu'on arrive à cet aboutissement-là. Il faut relever aussi, surtout, l'intelligence et la malice de LoGRI pour avoir associé plusieurs partenaires. Il y a l'ASE qui est là, qui appuie techniquement. Il y a les brillants étudiants de l'ASE qui appuient. Il y a plusieurs partenaires à travers l'Afrique qui sont là, des institutions fiscales, et on partage l'expérience et qui amène donc à ce succès-là. Donc, si on peut répéter cela exactement au niveau du système foncier, où on parle de collaboration entre les parties prenantes, donc notamment l'administration centrale, l'administration communale et même les payeurs d'impôts, les contribuables. Donc, à partir de cela, moi, je pense que le système qui s'applique déjà dans les pays anglophones, essentiellement au Ghana, peut être un système efficace à élargir l'assiette fiscale. Maintenant, comme un bon économiste, il ne faut pas oublier le problème du passager clandestin. Et si jamais on rencontre ce problème des gens qui ne veulent pas participer, alors on ramène le modèle que Nicolas nous a présenté ce matin pour forcer ces gens-là à payer. Donc voilà ce que je peux vous donner pour rentrer chez vous à l'issue de cette conférence. Merci.
Thank you very much, Sam. And I'll say two things. One is just to Sam again, thank you for being our partner in this. And we look very much forward to doing that much longer in the future. Second, I think Sam hit a very important point, and we'll repeat it, I'm sure, later again, is that the strength of LoGRI is all the partners that we work with to deliver all of these work. We are helpers. The champions of the reform are in the room. And I think in some ways, we'd like to think that everyone in this room is part of LoGRI in delivering the broader mission that we collectively have for ourselves. Our next speaker needs no more introduction. You know her well, Nima Kamara from Kanifing, Gambia. Let me pass you this microphone. You're here.
Thank you so much. I think I'll start with Sam. I think he just summarized everything. Technology is the key of the takeaways from here. I think technology will really help the councils in having this database is very important and it's very key. And then from there, I think we can move to the cashless to minimize leakages in the councils, because the trust building is very key for us to convince our taxpayers, our citizens, to be paying their taxes. If the trust is not there, it will be very difficult to have this compliance we are yearning for. And then the human resources, we need to support the human resources, is very key. And then not just talking of human resources, but the competent human resources. councils needs to invest in competent human resource, it will really support councils to get where we are hoping to. And the collaboration between the local and the central government. Honestly, it's sometimes very, I don't know how to put it, but being together with different councils from different countries, the issues are really similar. There is too much friction between the central and the local authorities. We are not rivals. We're supposed to be working together. Like one of our colleagues mentioned earlier, politically, we are their tool. We should be their tool because we are supposed to be their servant. We are supposed to be delivering directly to the grassroots. So supporting the local authorities is like supporting the nation at large. I hope we can convince our colleagues. We are supposed to be colleagues and working together and not supposed to be fighting all the time. So these are the takeaways I have, like understanding from one of our colleagues that they also sign MOUs with the wards, at the wards level. So I think we can also take that back home to see how best to reinforce on this, because our local leaders, like the alcalos at our levels, who support the council in convincing taxpayers in paying their tax and to understand more. And I think to wrap it all, citizen engagement is very key. We have to be communicating with our people. We have to sensitize them and we have to educate them. And we have to always tell them where their monies are going so that we can build this trust at the end of the day. Thank you very much. And I thank LoGRI and everybody else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll keep us moving. Our next speaker also needs no introduction. Kwame Obusu, I think it's fair to say no one has ever spoken with such passion about building a fiscal cadastre. On passe à toi.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Wilson. Et je note que les taxes foncières sont très importantes pour nos administrations, aussi bien l'État que les collectivités locales. Et un effort doit être fait quotidiennement pour tirer profit du potentiel que regorge la taxe foncière dans nos pays. Je note également qu'il doit y avoir une forte collaboration entre les institutions nationales, les services des impôts, les collectivités, les autres entités comme le cadastre et les autres services. Il doit y avoir une forte collaboration en termes de partage d'informations. Et pour que cela soit possible, il faut mettre en place des bases de données qui communiquent directement entre elles et qui est au niveau de la loi des obligations à toutes les institutions de pouvoir utiliser cette application pour le partage, comme nous avons vu l'expérience du Sénégal et autres. Je note aussi qu'il y a beaucoup de partenaires qui font des efforts pour appuyer les pays, à l'instar de LoGRI et d'autres partenaires, et qu'il appartient également à nos administrations de tirer profit de ces partages d'expérience pour améliorer la mobilisation des recettes foncières. Dernièrement, je note aussi que les réformes foncières dépendent de la volonté politique de nos pays et un plaidoyer doit être fait à chaque niveau pour que le politique puisse mettre les moyens à la disposition des administrations pour la construction d'un cadastre moderne à l'instar du Rwanda ou l'utilisation de nouvelles méthodologies ou de techniques d'évaluation comme ce que prône LoGRI. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much again. The next speaker I'm going to pass to is Estelle Pla. Estelle is a researcher with extensive experience working in Africa, and she's now an investment officer at the Fund for Innovation and Development, which is a French government program to support research, to test and learn about experiments in strengthening public administration in African countries. And they've supported a number of the research projects that were presented at this conference. They also provided some financial support to us to help us to put on this conference, to allow all of us to be here together. So I want to thank Estelle for your support in this project, and now pass to you for your reflections.
Thank you. Donc, je suis représentant d'ici du FID, le Fonds d'innovation pour le développement. Qui dans la salle connaît le Fonds d'innovation pour le développement? Ok, le Sénégal est identifié. Ok, le Fonds d'innovation pour le développement est hébergé donc à l'AFD, l'Agence française de développement, et on vise à promouvoir l'émergence d'innovations pour lutter contre la pauvreté et les inégalités, et à évaluer de manière rigoureuse, comme l'a dit Will, leur efficacité et accélérer leur déploiement à grande échelle. Et notre particularité, c'est qu'on a un financement par stade et qu'on finance tout type d'organisation. Donc, comme l'a dit Will, nous avons financé 3 projets de recherche qui ont bénéficié aussi de l'appui de LoGRI et dont on a parlé un petit peu tout le long de ces 2 jours. Donc, le premier projet, je voulais aussi vous parler des résultats qu'on n'a pas forcément évoqués. Le premier projet, donc, c'est au Sénégal, à Dakar, donc, avec le programme d'appui à la gestion des contributions foncières. Donc, avec la DGID, il y a eu la création d'une plateforme numérique de centralisation des données cadastrales. Et donc, ça a fait l'objet d'une évaluation d'impact. Et les résultats sont assez probants. Donc, dans les zones ciblées, il y a eu 38 000 parcelles ajoutées à la base fiscale. Il y a eu un taux d'enregistrement de 92% dans les zones ciblées. Et il y a eu plus d'1 milliard de francs CFA de recettes fiscales supplémentaires. Pour continuer à ajouter, il y a eu aussi la conformité fiscale qui a été multipliée par 3. Et on a observé aussi une réduction de la sous-évaluation des propriétés les plus chères, donc ce qui contribue aussi à l'équité fiscale. Le deuxième projet est dans la ville de Kananga, en République démocratique du Congo. Et ce projet, donc cette évaluation d'impact, a visé à tester différents barèmes d'imposition. Donc je sais que ça, on n'en a pas forcément trop parlé, ou alors j'étais pas dans les bons panels. Mais ce qu'on a vu, c'est que le barème progressif, notamment, a vu la conformité fiscale multipliée par 5 par rapport au système proportionnel ou au système fixe, qui est le status quo pour l'instant. Il y a eu également 36% de recettes supplémentaires en moyenne. Et plus important encore, il y a eu aussi une expérimentation sur quand on donne l'information aux citoyens sur comment est calculé leur barème d'imposition. Donc, dans ce cas-là, les citoyens ont perçu le système comme étant plus équitable, ce qui a renforcé leur confiance et leur volonté de payer l'impôt. Le troisième projet qui fait l'objet d'une évaluation d'impact, c'est le projet donc, avec la mairie de Kanifing en Gambie, dont on a largement parlé. Et là, les résultats ne sont pas encore disponibles. Mais ici, l'objectif, c'est vraiment de voir concrètement comment est-ce que le paiement de l'impôt contribue à l'amélioration des services publics. Et donc, pour faire le lien avec ce qui a été discuté au cours de ces 2 jours, tout d'abord, sur la confiance et la légitimité, moi, j'ai retenu plusieurs citations. La première, c'était « Trust is not an option ». La deuxième, c'était « When people are taxed, they start demanding services ». Et donc ça, je pense que c'est assez bien démontré avec le projet dans la ville de Kananga sur le fait que quand il y a de la transparence dans l'utilisation des fonds, et il y a de l'équité qui est perçue, ça renforce vraiment la moralité fiscale et l'acceptabilité de l'impôt. Donc ça, cette recherche l'a démontré. Ensuite, il y a eu pas mal de discussions sur la digitalisation, qui n'est vraiment pas une fin en soi, mais une façon de construire des ponts entre les administrations. OK. Et, je vais wrap up, comme on dit en anglais. Je voulais finir sur le fait que les 3 projets dont je viens de parler sont vraiment des pilotes de réforme donc, qui ont été soutenus par LoGRI. Et on a évalué rigoureusement l'impact de ces réformes envisagées avant leur généralisation et leur mise à l'échelle. Et ça, c'est vraiment la démarche que le FID encourage. Et pour conclure, c'est un appel à projet qui est ouvert, en continu, en français et en anglais. Et donc, les chercheurs, les administrations locales, si vous avez des idées innovantes en matière de fiscalité pour le développement, n'hésitez pas à candidater.
Great. Thank you, Estelle. I mean, thank you again for your support, but also a good reminder. In some ways, everything we're doing here is about learning to then see how to replicate and build. And that's what Estelle's organization is really all committed to. Next, and maybe the most important of the people I need to introduce to make comments is Charles Yehunu, Charles is from the Department of Strategic Planning and Studies from the Director General of Taxes here in Benin. As you all know very well, if it weren't for the partnership of the Director General of Taxes in Benin, there would be no conference here that we're all at. Their partnership has been the key to let us do this. You've also heard about the many interesting experiences they've had in building their own system, from which we have all learned over the course of these 2 days. Charles coordinates very much of that. He coordinates very much of our partnership with them. So we want to thank you, Charles, and we will pass to you for your reflections.
Alors, merci beaucoup et bonjour à tous. J'ai pas été très actif peut-être dans l'atelier, mais j'ai suivi du début jusqu'à la fin. Alors, je voudrais déjà, comme l'a dit le professeur, il faut dire effectivement que la DGI du Bénin est en train de rénover depuis un certain temps. Et nous sommes en train de sortir de l'ancien système que nous pensons un peu archaïque parce que ça ne montrait pas toute l'équité qu'il y avait derrière, la transparence qu'il y avait derrière. Alors, aujourd'hui, nous sommes en train d'aller dans un système qui va permettre de renforcer la conformité. Et je pense que nous avons reçu aussi l'appui de LoGRI, hein, puisque nous sommes en pleine réforme. Et nous avons commencé déjà cette année avec la collecte électronique. Et donc, nous sommes en train de sortir de tout ce qui est manuel pour entrer dans la collecte électronique. Et je voudrais également dire que l'atelier sur les 2 jours nous a permis de conforter notre position sur un certain nombre de points qui montrent quand même qu'aujourd'hui, il faut digitaliser. Il faut digitaliser. Et pour cela, je pense que nous allons toujours continuer avec l'appui de LoGRI pour pouvoir y arriver. Mais nous avons également noté des expériences dans certains pays qui pourraient permettre de renforcer la collaboration. Et moi, je voudrais plaider à la suite de cet atelier et qu'on puisse mettre en place, je ne sais pas si c'est un forum des administrations, pour quand même que les gens puissent partager de temps en temps les expériences. Vous allez constater dans plusieurs institutions, ça se fait, mais généralement, les gens ne parlent pas de taxe foncière. Alors qu'on sait aujourd'hui que la taxe foncière est quand même un potentiel très important. Alors, autre chose que j'ai noté, c'est que la taxe foncière n'est pas seulement une taxe pour renflouer les caisses de l'État, mais ça devait venir améliorer le bien-être des populations. Et là, ça permettra de renforcer également leur contribution. Et il y a la volonté politique également sur laquelle nous devons beaucoup miser pour pouvoir améliorer les outils de collecte. Autre chose que je n'ai pas vu vraiment dans les discussions, je ne sais pas si peut-être ça m'a échappé, pour moi, la taxe foncière ne doit pas être également un élément qui décourage l'investissement. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut faire en sorte que les contribuables se sentent aisés de payer la taxe. Il ne faut pas qu'on se dise, lorsque j'investis plus, je dois payer plus. Donc, il faut faire en sorte que la taxe foncière contribue effectivement au développement de notre économie. Voilà ce que je voulais quand même apporter, tout en remerciant l'ensemble des partenaires, l'ensemble des participants et également dire que le Bénin a quand même tiré beaucoup d'expérience. Je sais également que les expériences du Bénin également peuvent être également suivies, notamment la signature des conventions, ainsi de suite, et la forte collaboration que nous avons avec la mairie. Au Bénin, la collaboration avec la NDF n'est pas encore totale, vous l'avez compris dans les échanges, mais au terme, après la mise en place du cadastre, je pense que ça serait effectif. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Merci encore de votre partenariat dans tout cela. Last from our opening lineup, I want to pass the floor to Flavia. Again, Flavia needs no more introduction, but to remind you, she's the supervisor of the GIS unit within the Kampala City Council or Capital City Authority in Uganda. Flavia, over to you.
Thank you very much. Mine is going to start with like the way we do research. There's a problem. Our institutions are instituted. We are hired to work in there to deliver services. We have outputs to give. There's no money. We have the law. It says we can collect property rates from buildings because the buildings are existing on ground. What do? I think we know that by now from this conference, we know that we have to go digital. That's for starters. We have to do digital valuation, which also has location information. And we all agree that it's expensive. Yes, it is. But how do we move forward? I like Estelle's submission. They've supported valuation in different municipalities, and they have a call for projects. Let us prepare to dig into that grant. But also, in case we don't get the chance to get the grant, the Kampala Capital City Authority valuation CAMV was done using a loan. But by the time we closed the project, we're already getting ×2 what we spent on the loan, because we used around $8 million to do the CAMV because it was done in-house. So by the time we closed the project, we were already getting ×2 what we had put in. So if we are to look at the monies that we got from the time the project started until we started using the data, by now we have already paid that loan and we are in ×. So I'm saying it's worth the investment. We need to invest in data. We need to invest in our systems. And we need to let the systems speak. We need to share data through systems, through APIs. That's the best way forward, the most sustainable way forward. Thank you very much. Oh, also, I come from Kampala, from Uganda, the pearl of Africa, the home of the mountain gorillas. Please come to Uganda, come visit. You will have fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Flavia. I think I can reciprocate to say I'm from Canada. We have lots of snow. Okay, so this is the end of those we invited specifically to offer some summary comments. We have about 10 minutes, if we want them, to open the floor to others. But we'll say this is the fast round. This is the rapid round. So if anyone wants to share one reflection from the conference, one idea, one message, one innovation, one thing that struck you, we'd like to invite you to do it. But I'm going to set a timer, 90 seconds maximum. So it has to be fast. And that way we can hear from a number of people if there are final thoughts you want to share. And at that point, then I'll pass to Titilola to say some final thank yous and to formally close the event. Judical.
Ok, Judical. Mon nom, c'est Judical Ito, je suis béninois. Je suis de l'African School of Economics. J'aimerais partager qu'on appelle une réflexion de manière globale sur ce qu'on a fait au cours de ces 2 jours pour la conférence. On a beaucoup parlé qu'on appelle des aspects techniques et de manière récurrente, la volonté politique est revenue. Mais il y a quelque chose d'élément que je n'ai pas vu ou bien qu'on n'a pas du tout abordé. C'est comment conscientiser en fait pour pouvoir changer, c'est-à-dire, parce qu'on ne peut pas changer la population. Moi, je pense que les leaders ne viennent pas d'ailleurs, ils viennent tous de la population. Donc, moi, je pense qu'il y a un problème au niveau même des mœurs, c'est-à-dire comment conscientiser les mœurs. Parce que dans l'autre groupe, tout à l'heure, on a parlé de comment faire, parce qu'il y a des interférences politiques pour éviter à certaines personnes le recouvrement forcé ou bien les mesures coercitives. Mais on a juste dit, alors pour ça, bon, on n'a pas parlé le fond. Moi, je pense qu'on doit beaucoup investir aussi dans la conscientisation. Il y a des pays en dehors de l'Afrique où l'injustice fiscale fait aussi honte ou bien plus honte même que le vol. Pourquoi les Africains, on ne peut pas aussi venir à un tel niveau de conscientisation? Parce que je pense que si on le fait, on résout 2 problèmes. À la fois, on n'aura plus de dirigeants ou bien peu de dirigeants parce qu'on ne peut pas dire le risque zéro n'existe pas. Mais on aura peu de dirigeants qui vont s'adonner à ces pratiques. Et au niveau aussi des contribuables, la conscience serait aussi forte pour qu'on ait réellement un niveau d'adhésion qui soit très élevé. Et je pense que le système ne doit pas reposer sur la bonne volonté des personnes. Aujourd'hui, au Bénin, par exemple, comme c'est dit par par l'administrateur des impôts, beaucoup d'efforts sont faits, y compris le critique fiscal. Il y a une question là-bas. Si par exemple un appel vient de la présidence, parce que...
Tu as déjà
Merci
parlé
beaucoup.
trop.
Merci.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Judical. So I really set the timer. We'll go through a few. Mohammed, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Will. So for me, having gone to this conference the past 2 days, the thing that came out clearly is that we know the problems of low revenue in African cities that are badly underfunded. And we know the solution is one of them is property tax. And most importantly, we also know we have to adopt technology, we have to adopt process reform. So in other words, we also have the ideas and the solutions. So the intellectual capacities, the ideas are there. What is not really there that we need to merge in this process is the political will, in my estimation. And I think that will be my thought going home. How do we merge the technology, the ideas, and the need for revenue with political will? How do we make sure that politicians see this as not as a vote loser, but in fact as a vote gainer over time? Yeah, and finally, a quick one. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Kigali. I've been fighting with myself to get a PhD topic. And Will was presenting something. All of a sudden, I saw a PhD topic there, but I won't share it because I know there are hungry researchers there.
We are always happy when people leave with new ideas. Okay, who is next? Sam.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just one thing that struck me in all of these is the ability to use local institutions to do the enforcement. I know Sierra Leone has a history of using chiefs, but I thought that it's a novelty to also look at the traditional institutions and how best they can help us to do enforcement. So I thought that it was a good thing to look at. The other thing, for GI data is almost universal, but I thought that we have so much information as technical officers, but how do we communicate this to the politicians? I think it's something that we need to look at. How do you communicate that? The politician is one who is thinking of his vote. He has to be in power to be able to take the decisions. So with all this data and the revenue that would come, how do you convince him? So how we communicate is very important. That is what I'm taking away. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. And I think we all feel the same question, right? How do you convince the people you need to convince that this is the right agenda? But I think we're building our ammunition to make that argument. Ken.
Yes, to strengthen interinstitutional collaboration, to pin central government down to devolving property tax authority to local government, for reducing the complexities for land administration, to enhance domestic resource mobilization, and promote effective and participatory territorial planning. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Or else everyone wants to hear from Titi Lola now. Titi Lola it is. So let me just say, we have one more. Regina, you're risking the anger of the crowd. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was good to listen in. I sort of seem to be an outsider because I come from civil society. So my key takeaway is digitalization isn't an end in itself. There's still work that needs to be done. The Sierra Leone case, where there was a jump from the increment then to almost 16%. I hope that next year or 2 years from now, we don't come back and it's negative, right? So that means we need to come up with sustainable ways of ensuring that we raise property tax. It's also good to learn about the fact that the model that is used in West Africa is different from the one of East Africa, right? Here, property tax is collected by the central government. like in Uganda, is collected by the local government. So, you know, that comparison and what works best. It's good to ensure equity, fairness, effective accountability. But I think all in all, I think next year we shall come back with some examples from civil society and what our role can be going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina. I'll take 1 minute. Okay, so I think that's great. And I'll just pick up on the last two thoughts. One is in this room, you know, every country is very different, but yet I think every country faces in some ways the same core challenges, but in slightly different ways. That's a very interesting group of people to have together to discuss those shared challenges, but also explore different solutions to those challenges together. The second is we can already think to the next time we get together. And I think the next time we get together, I really believe there will be so many more successes to share, not just about raising revenue, but also ensuring that revenue benefits the people it's designed to benefit. So I will finish here by just saying again, thank you to everyone, particularly Sam, Charles, Estelle, others who supported. For the rest of the thank yous, let me pass to Titilola.
Thanks, Will. So it has been 2 days of talking, learning, and connecting. I hope that everyone has had a tremendous time like I have. So without wanting to go over all the things that have already been said, I wanted to share a couple of reflections for me. So yesterday, Kwame Obosu told us about co-location in Togo and how that facilitated data sharing. But then we also heard from somebody else that they're all located in the same place and that they still work in silos. So I walked away yesterday thinking, so is there magic in Togo, perchance? Or is it just that the contexts are different? And that just brings me to this thought that collaboration within tiers of government and between tiers of government is critical if we are to reform. There was also Ernest Karasira from Rwanda who told us about how they had put in place interoperable systems so that data could be shared quite easily and progressively became a real-time thing. Fantastic success story, but made me think, why haven't other countries done the same? And again, I come back to this, political leadership. Contexts differ, but wherever you find the political will to do something, it gets done. So the ideas and strategies that we've shared have all been very insightful, as I'm sure each of us has been drawing various parallels to our own individual contexts, you know, from your homes and your countries from which you've come. Many of the strategies that we've shared seem simple, but in practice will require leadership, change, and discipline to succeed. Putting citizens at the heart of what you do as practitioners and policymakers resonated through all our sessions. I think we heard it in different ways from all the sessions. So ultimately, it's about the people that we serve. The robustness of the sessions indicated just how important the issues we've been discussing are. And therefore, the need to find innovative, workable solutions in our different contexts, drawing from learning from other places. And I hope the discussions will not end here. Instead, that they will continue within our groups and our countries and across countries. And I hope that they will just gather momentum and keep going until the change that we're all hoping for actually happen. So from this day forth, I anoint all of you as ambassadors for these new approaches that we've been discussing and talking about for the last 2 days. You are all ambassadors of these new approaches. With all of that said, I would like to now thank ASC, DGI Benin, who have been phenomenal in guiding and supporting our planning and ultimately success of this conference. I thank also Estelle from FID for their support. I thank the interpreters. Do they deserve a round of applause? They have very skillfully translated and enabled both our Francophone and Anglophone delegates to fully participate in this conference. So without them, we could not have been as inclusive as we've been. So thank you. I thank Azalea Hotel, who have assisted us and risen to the occasion with every challenge that we have faced. Your staff have been warm and responsive, and for that, we're very appreciative. So our thanks also go to the panel chairs. Those of you who have worked with us over the past few weeks to get ready to chair our panels, thank you so very much. A round of applause. I thank all our speakers, facilitators, and contributors in our breakout sessions. Your expert knowledge and experience was evident throughout all the sessions. So thank you very much for doing it. I thank also all participants all together in person and online. Thank you for sticking with us through the past 2 days and for contributing so very much in a keen and active way that has made every session so lively. So thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. And finally, not the least, but finally, I thank LoGRI and its leadership. The Conference Planning Committee, I want to specially thank Regan, Marie-Reine, Lorena, Colette, Camille, Jana, and Moyo. Where is he? Go, Moyo! And the entire LoGRI team. All of you have been phenomenal. Thank you. A round of applause for the LoGRI team. So with all that said, I bid you farewell and safe journey back to your destinations. And now I've just been told you're all supposed to wait for the group photos. So thank you so much and goodbye. Thank you.